All right. All right. Today is a big day, or it's supposed to be a big day. Oh man. Today will be the day of the third non-confidence vote within our government. It was teased last Thursday that it was supposed to happen, but I guess it was just the motion. Today is the actual vote. Today should be quite interesting. Speaking of interesting things, breaking news. Over the weekend, the Syria government has officially fallen. Syria as a whole, most likely right now in pure chaos. You got a lot of different groups, a lot of different religious groups, extremist groups within Syria that want a piece of the pie. And I do believe it is going to be an absolute nightmare. It's been an absolute nightmare in the Middle East for a very long time. And I don't know why anybody is really shocked. But this is most likely not going to make things any better. Was Assad a good person? Probably not. Probably not at all. But are the people that are going to get into power any better? No. No, they're not. As a matter of fact, from what I've read, there are people like Al-Qaeda and stuff like that. So, not good, obviously. But, hey, what can you do? Not much when it comes to the Middle East. Because, like I said, it's an absolute nightmare, and I don't think anything over there will change anytime soon. How's everybody doing on this fine day? Very exciting day, might I add. Not the fact that the Syria government has fallen, but the fact that TRUDEAU got community noted. What an idiot. You can only lie so many times before even the people on social media, the factual checkers of information, the fact checkers. Oh my god, Justin Trudeau just got community noted. Beautiful. Thank you, Elon Musk. In 2 weeks, you'll be paying less for groceries at the register. Canadians are getting a tax break starting December 14th. The community note. Most groceries are already exempt of GST. Wow. Wow. What an absolute idiot. And I think it's even worse that people believe him. People are kind of falling for this air quotation tax break. Sure, in 2 weeks you might be paying 2% less on certain items, but after those 2 months are up, you'll be paying tenfold as the government sits there wanting to recoup everything they lost over those 2 months. Although it might not seem like a lot, but nationwide, they will lose millions and millions of dollars by removing this tax. Which apparently most items, specifically groceries, are already exempt from. Which I think is kind of funny. All this time, they were boosting up this tax break. You guys will be paying less on groceries. You'll be paying less on alcohol and essential items like diapers. Little do people know that's already exempt. So nothing is really going to change there. Just another sham in the list of shams that the liberal Trudeau government wants to push on you. I, quite frankly, am tired of it. I don't know about you guys, but I'm tired of it. I'm tired of this smug POS lying through his teeth over and over again. And the lies have become so incredibly blatant that the community noters come out and say, guess what, buddy? It's time to go. It's time to get your stuff straight. Because you're lying. You're bloody lying. Obviously, the big news of today, I can't stop thinking about it. It's been the only thing I've been thinking about. Trudeau Liberal set to face third Conservative non-confidence vote. Obviously, the sad reality is the NDP are not going to back it at all. This confidence vote is most likely going to fail, like the previous two have failed. And guys, we'll probably continue to see the absolute circus continue that it is. The Liberals are set to face a third non-confidence vote on Monday, aka today, but the government is likely to survive with the support of the NDP. Members of Parliament are supposed to vote on a motion that quotes NDP leader Jagmeet Singh's criticisms of the Liberals and asks the House to agree with Singh and vote to bring down the government. Pierre a couple days ago, I think it was before question period. Actually, it was the day he motioned. He motioned this vote to happen. He read out an entire list of things that Jagmeet had said, trying to oust the Liberals himself. Jagmeet is just a hypocrite. We all know this. We all know this about the NDP. They claim they're for Canadians, but they're not. Time and time again, we get thrown under the bus. While they support countries overseas, they support international things. They claim they care about the working class here in Canada, although when they got into power in the 90s, they absolutely destroyed all of Ontario and all the businesses ended up leaving. It's kind of hard to say you are for the working class when your track record shows that. Not very good, is it? Not very good. All right. We have Pierre talking about an economic update with the Canada-US relations. This happened yesterday. He will also be speaking with reporters here. So let's take a listen, shall we?
And now in English. I hope everyone's enjoying the snow. Those big, fluffy snowflakes are falling from the sky. And we still don't have a fall economic update. It's almost Christmas time. Chrystia Freeland told you that she would have one by the end of the year, after the Prime Minister's office had told you that one was coming early next week. I actually made an offer to the Prime Minister and Ms. Freeland that I would give up some of Conservative opposition motion time on Monday, tomorrow, to let them introduce their fall update. An unprecedented act of nonpartisan generosity. I was shocked to see them turn it down. They claimed that they wanted to introduce such a fall update and that it was just those mean Conservatives that were blocking them from doing it. So I cleared the way. 2 hours. They could have introduced it. But they said no. Bizarre. Normally, governments love to introduce fall updates because they are gigantic opportunities to advertise all the good things the government is doing for the finances of the country and the pocketbooks of the people. Well, that is, if you're not doing any good things, then you probably don't want anybody to know about it. And that is, in fact, the case of this government. The reality is that Chrystia Freeland and Justin Trudeau have lost control of the finances. Justin Trudeau is a weak prime minister. He's lost control of the borders, lost control of immigration, lost control of spending, lost control of the debt, lost control of inflation, lost control of housing costs, lost control of crime, lost control of drugs. He's lost control of his own cabinet, with his foreign minister launching her leadership campaign on the front page of the New York Times with a big, beautiful photo shoot that she would have gone into a studio to have done, and a screaming headline describing her as a potential successor. He has totally lost control, and now he doesn't want Canadians to see the disastrous state of our books. Remember, he promised, she promised, the deficit would not exceed $40 billion. And now they won't tell us what the deficit is. There are real consequences for these costly failures. After 9 years of Trudeau, everything costs more, with food prices having risen 37% faster in Canada than they did in the United States during the exact same time period. That gap coincides with the coming into force of the carbon tax on the farmers and truckers who bring us our food, a tax he now wants to quadruple to 61 cents a litre. This is a Prime Minister who's doubled our housing costs. So now 80% of Canadians believe for the first time in Canadian history that homeownership is only for the very rich. Last week, OECD said that Vancouver and Toronto are now by far the most expensive housing markets in North America. We have the highest housing costs and the lowest incomes. You know, look at comparison. Seattle's housing costs are about 30% lower than Vancouver's, even though Seattle workers make far more money than Vancouverites make. Housing costs in Toronto are significantly higher than Chicago, even though Chicago workers make more than Torontonians. The two worst housing costs. How is it possible that we have 10 times as much land per capita as the Americans, that our housing costs more than theirs? Well, that's because of 9 years of Justin Trudeau's out-of-control inflationary money printing and immigration, and his financing of local bureaucracies that block home building. And not only do we have expensive homes, we have more homeless people, 38% more chronic homelessness, 1,400 homeless encampments in Ontario after 9 years of Trudeau and the NDP Liberals, 35 homeless encampments in Halifax after 9 years of Trudeau and the NDP Liberals. 2 million people line up at food banks. A quarter of our kids are going to school hungry, and a quarter of parents are skipping meals so their kids don't have to. Those same parents toss and turn at night because they are the most indebted households in the G7. By far, it's not even close. And then our own debt, a national debt, has doubled. Trudeau and the NDP Liberals have added more debt than all prior prime ministers combined. And now they won't even tell us how big the debt or the deficit is. Crime, chaos, drugs, and disorder now spill into our once safe streets, with rampant repeat offenders out killing, maiming, raping, and decimating our communities, our once safe and tranquil communities. Hate crimes are up 256%, with church burnings, fire bombings of synagogues, and attacks on other places of worship now out of control. With all this damage, with everything that Justin Trudeau and the NDP Liberals have done to make life more costly and dangerous, it would be unrealistic for me to ask them to improve the situation in their upcoming fall economic update. So I have a more realistic request. Actually, it's more of a plea. Stop.
All right, I'm actually going to interrupt Pierre Poilievre with Pierre Poilievre because this is live right now as we are currently speaking.
The end of the day, approve housing after all that process. Now, we believe that the shortest line is a short highway from point A to point B, and that is why we want money to be sent directly into the pockets of those who are buying the houses by reducing the tax burden. Government statistics have shown us the following.
This looks like it's the motion for the federal sales tax on new homes that they are going to remove. So Pierre is motioning this bill, which, if it gets passed, will then get voted on to pass.
More.
This is just the motion for it, though.
Being built every single year. Less of a tax burden, more building. Now that's a solution.
I'm assuming the non-confidence vote will come later today.
And the aspect that I'm the most proud of.
The fact that he's here this early speaks volumes, by the way, because he's never here this early.
The Accelerator Fund, or as I call it, the Disaccelerator Fund, which is actually slowing down construction. I am very proud to announce that we're going to scrap that program. A program the Liberals spent $8 billion on. in order to bloat the bureaucracy and to give more money to greedy politicians. I find it frankly pathetic that the housing minister calls up mayors to say, look, I've given you a big check. You need to send a letter asking for my program to stay in place, even if it actually slows down housing construction. And of course, those politicians say, yes, well, I want that taxpayer money. I want the checks. Of course, politicians want money, but we are not here to work for other politicians. We are here to work for taxpayers and for youth, young Canadians who want to buy homes.
Alors, c'est avec beaucoup de fierté que je vais éliminer.
So I will be very...
No tax on new homes and no tax on tips would be huge.
It's not that these programs don't help at all. It would be wrong, and it would be incorrect to say that they don't help. It's worse than that. They actually do harm. The thing is that
Canada also needs Doge. We need a government, a department of government that will keep us efficient and accountable.
Preventing construction. And we know that
we can't have another runaway government for 4 years even. Like that's just not good. We cannot allow that to happen again.
This has been the case for 20 years. So if giving more money to municipalities actually sped up the construction of affordable housing, we would have the most affordable housing in the world. But that's clearly not the solution. The solution is to eliminate red tape, to scrap taxes, to leave the money in the pockets of people who are building and buying homes. And that is what we will do by scrapping GST on new builds, to end up saving up to $5,000 per Canadian family.
Speaker, we now learn that the Minister of Finance is finally going to introduce her fall economic update on December 19th. She calls it a fall update. Santa Claus will already have been preparing to lift off from North Pole. The snow will have been falling. The leaves have long disappeared into the earth, Madam Speaker, and they have disintegrated and biodegraded because it has been so long since those leaves actually fell, Madam Speaker, and yet we are waiting until the 19th because she wants to hide the fact that the weak Prime Minister has lost control of deficits, has lost control of spending, has lost control of our economy. We will see if she keeps her solemn commitment to a $40 billion deficit or whether that promise will also go by the wayside. That's why we have only one request. Stop. Exactly. Just stop. In the name of God, stop the inflationary spending. Stop doubling debt. Stop driving up taxes on starving Canadians. Stop everything you're doing until we get a carbon tax election, at which time common sense conservatives can axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. And they can stop taxing new homes. That's why common sense conservatives are proposing to get rid of the GST on new homes, to save up to $50,000 on a home for a young family trying to start out. After this government doubled the cost, it's the least that we could do. Now, they would rather have the money go to bureaucrats. They believe in trickle-down government. They take from the people, give it to one government, that gives it to another government, that gives it to a third government, that gives it to some bureaucrats, and these bureaucrats apparently are going to start shuffling papers more quickly to eventually approve some homes. It's not that this program, the Housing Accelerator, that I planned with delight to get rid of, it's not that it hasn't helped. It is that it has made the problem so much worse. Because when you give more money to bureaucrats, it's not that they don't do helpful things. It's that they stand in the way and cause even more harm. Listen to one developer who said just the other day, Over the last 10 years, the list of application requirements has increased exponentially, and so has the number of bureaucrats looking at your application. And there's often a pattern of staff waiting till the last day. On the day 29 of 30, they write back with a comment pertaining to something minor, which triggers another cycle. Imagine 3 or 4 such reviews of cycle, Madam Speaker. The more of these bureaucrats, the more layers, the more delay we need. By getting rid of this program alone, and doing nothing else, we will speed up housing construction. And yes, there will be greedy, fat cat, big city politicians who will whine and complain because they had expected to have that money to build their empires. My message to them is, go on whining and complaining, because I'm not here to build your empire. I'm here to build homes for Canadians. And that will be the choice, Madam Speaker, in a housing tax election. Either the NDP Liberals who fund local bureaucracies or common sense Conservatives who axe the tax to build the homes. Thank you.
Questions and comments, the honourable member for St. John Rothsay.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the Leader of the Opposition for his speech. And Madam Speaker, as I say often, I am from the beautiful riding of St. John Rothsay, where the Leader has visited frequently recently. But one thing that I do want to talk about, Madam Speaker, is the pride I have in our programs, like the Housing Accelerator, like the Rapid Housing Initiative, like the Co-Investment Fund, that have benefited my riding greatly. But one thing that's certainly come to notice of late is the Leader of the Opposition calling mayors across this country incompetent, amongst other things. So my question to the Leader of the Opposition is this: will you stop calling mayors across this country incompetent, and is the mayor of my riding of St. John incompetent? Thank you.
You're all incompetent.
I don't know his mayor, so I can't comment on that, but I know his mayor's MP is incompetent, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker. And we know that because since he became the MP, housing costs have doubled in St. John. He wasn't able to get the Energy East pipeline approved. He squeals away that he doesn't like the carbon tax, but then he votes to quadruple that same tax. I don't know if that's duplicity or incompetence, but probably a combination of the two. Now, one mayor was complaining the other day that I said, this is Mayor in Aurora, said he wants me to give the GST to him off of new homes. Can you imagine that? He said, do away with this idea of axing the GST on new homes and just give him the money. So every time someone buys a home in Aurora, the GST would go to the mayor instead. If that were going to help build homes, Madam Speaker, it already would have. His revenues are up 192%, while population growth and inflation has been 62% in the last 15 years. And what has that done? It's driven up more housing costs. We need less money for politicians and less taxes for home buyers.
The Honourable Member for Rivière-des-Mille-Îles. Madam Speaker, I think it's quite sad that the Leader of the Opposition is lowering himself to the kinds of things he just said to the Liberal member. I would like to remind him that there is nothing that shows that eliminating this 5% tax will actually lower housing costs. For example, since September 2023, there hasn't been GST on rental housing starts. And yet, despite that, there has been zero measurable impact on the cost of housing. Thank you. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Well, my colleague has said that scrapping the GST on apartments has not yet reduced the cost of homes. That's because houses are not apartments. There's a difference between an apartment and a house. So eliminating the tax on apartments will reduce the costs of apartments, and eliminating GST on houses will reduce the costs of houses. Does that help my colleague?
Hamilton Centre.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. You know, last week, the Leader of the Conservative Party actually told on himself. He stood up and he called a picket line a rally for striking workers. And yet he cosplays as though he's a working class hero. So my question through you to him is quite simple. Is the Leader of the official opposition still adamant about turning back our labor laws and making Canada a right-to-work nation? Or will he stand with New Democrats and force the Liberals to end the Section 107 ministerial directions that undermine charter rights and privileges for unions and workers?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, I'll answer his questions very directly. We are not going to be bringing in a right-to-work law. And as the second question is, will we stand with the New Democrats for unions? Well, that's exactly what I'm asking him to do today. We have a motion in the House of Commons today that condemns this government for robbing workers of the right to strike and votes non-confidence in the government that the NDP leader has said is greedy, corporate-driven, and anti-worker. So we're ready to stand up today in that vote. The question is, will the NDP stand by its own words, stand by workers, or will they sell out once again for this Prime Minister?
No, the National Department of Pins will probably stand up for the Prime Minister again. The NDP are garbage.
Speaker, for recognizing me and giving me an opportunity to speak on this motion. And I will start by saying at the outset that I'm glad that we're actually having a debate on a substantive motion, and I will talk a little bit more about it, but also to let you know that I'll be splitting my time with member from King Hans on this important issue. And so I'm glad that we're having a debate on a substantive issue around how do we build more homes in Canada. Now, I will say to you that we have that challenge because of the fact that Canada is growing. We're growing in size. We're 40 million people now, and I'm one of those people who say that that's a good thing that we are growing as a country, as we have an aging population, and we need to make sure that we have more young people who are working in our country and are able to populate our country from coast to coast to coast. But of course, with that comes challenges on the infrastructure. We obviously have to keep pace with the growing population. We have to build more homes. We have to build more roads, public transit. We need to make sure that the infrastructure necessary to serve these homes, like water and sewer and electricity, is there as well, which of course all of it costs money and it takes time to build. Now, how do we go around doing that is a really important question, and I think that's what we are debating here through this particular opposition to the motion. And I will put aside all the name calling and all the personal insults. I think that's beneath this place, and I think it's beneath all of us. I want to give credit where credit is due, that at least for the very first time, the Conservative Party on this substantive issue has put forward a policy idea. Whether you agree or disagree, that's obviously up to all of us. But I'm glad to see that they've actually put forward an idea of eliminating GST from home purchases. I believe is under $1 million. Now, I believe that that's an idea that merits a debate. But from my perspective, it's really not going to help build more homes, and therefore, I will be voting against this motion. But let me lay out my reasons for it. As I see it, what's being proposed is basically to cut 5% of the GST from all, I believe, new homes that are being built that are $1 million or less. But that's what it does, and I think, according to the Conservative Manson, will save about $5,000. It does not create any incentive whatsoever to build more homes, whether they are homes to own, whether there are homes to rent. Definitely what it does not do is create any incentive whatsoever to build homes that are affordable for people who are not able to rent a home or own a home and need some sort of a subsidy, some sort of support in order to have a roof over their heads. And so that particular element is missing. In fact, we know what we have heard from the Leader of Opposition just right now, that they have said that they will cancel all programs that exist, all kinds of supports and funding that exists that is going to help build affordable homes that we are seeing across the country. And I will, in a very quick moment, will speak to affordable housing that is being built in my community of Ottawa Centre alone. But in their proposal, they will basically cut the GST, and at the same time, they will cut all programs that allows for municipalities to build the infrastructure that is necessary. Water, sewer, electricity, all those things that are necessary to then actually make sure that these homes, people can live in these homes, can actually use that home. House without a plumbing is going to be, or without electricity is hard to really make it a home. So that is a very significant challenge that we are seeing, and that's why you're seeing a lot of other levels of government, provinces and municipalities, by the way, who play a bigger role in building homes, opposed to their idea. They don't support that idea because they see the challenge it causes. Now, the leader of the opposition can make it all about how he doesn't want to support politicians creating empires, etc., etc. He, as we know, has no experience in building anything. When he was Minister of Housing, I think it's 6 affordable homes that he was able to build, and that's not a record to be extremely proud of. But if you talk to mayors, if you talk to municipalities like right here in the city of Ottawa,
this guy thinks his last 10 years in office are something to be proud of. My God.
they will tell you that a simple cut in the GST is not sufficient to build the kind of homes we need. Because if it was sufficient, this idea would have been implemented some time ago. Not to mention the hypocrisy we're seeing from the Conservatives, because when we brought in, and the member from a bloc mentioned that earlier, when we block in as a government getting rid of GST from purpose-built rental, what did the Conservatives do? They voted against that idea. They voted against it. So they cannot be speaking and acting from both sides of their mouths. On one hand, they thought that was not good enough, that we should not be cutting GST from purpose-built rental, but now think that they've got the best idea in place and that everybody should align behind that idea. So what are we doing? What we are doing is we're trying to do a mix of both those ideas. On one hand, we have cut GST from purpose-built rental so that we can induce more building of rental properties. And in fact, we're seeing the result of that. We're seeing rents coming down across the country. But at the same time, Speaker, we are creating incentives for municipalities to enable to build more homes. And that is the essence of the Housing Accelerator Fund. What we have done through that fund is two things. One, we have using the money to build more affordable housing in our communities, in our municipalities, all of the municipalities, and we know there's about 15, 16 Conservative MPs who've been lobbying the minister.
Why is the Parliament Secretary of Health debating homes?
I don't want to take away from my important time, who have written letters to the Minister of Housing saying, please give that money to our municipalities because they need those dollars in order to support, to build more affordable housing in their respective communities. Like right here in Ottawa, for example, if you look at my community of Ottawa Centre, we are seeing affordable housing being built at Rochester Heights, which is, maybe 10 minutes drive from here. We're seeing a whole new village, we call it the Gladstone Village, which is starting to develop, that is being supported through the Housing Accelerator Fund. Or most recently, we made an announcement at Le Breton Flens called Le Breton Dream with Multi-Faith Housing Initiative, where
this is just pathetic.
For-profit housing going in side by side. We're talking about, at least in my writing alone, Speaker, about 1,000 affordable units that are starting to get built because of the housing.
Just starting to get built, huh? You guys have had 10 years to do that, and you're just doing it now.
Real people who can only afford market rate, people who cannot afford market rate. These are people who will be able to call downtown Ottawa their home. But that would have not happened if we had not given $176 million to City of Ottawa. But what's the second thing we're doing through the Housing Accelerator Fund? We also said, hey, City, hey, municipalities, if you need that money, you need to change your rules to allow for more density. You need to get rid of rules that say, not in my backyard. What we need is for you to allow for, at the least, for example, 4 units per lot. Now remember, we're the federal government, Speaker, so we don't have any authority. The province does. They can change the Planning Act, but we as the federal government does not have any authority to go and change municipal rules as to how much housing they should allow for. But through the Housing Accelerator Fund, we had created that incentive for municipalities to change the rules so that we can allow for more density. And that's exactly what we are seeing right now. Not only we are able to build more affordable homes, we are for developers, and ask any builder, any developer who likes more density, we have required municipalities to change their rules so that they can create and build more housing. That is smart policy, Madam Speaker, and that is why the approach that we have put forward is actually paying dividends. We are starting to see more housing starts as a result. We're starting to see more affordable housing being result. The solution that is being put forward, worthy of debate. I'm glad that they've finally put an idea together, but it's not going to solve the problem of cutting housing. It's a great slogan. It's great for the leader of the opposition to give fiery speeches and do his really bad acting. I think he needs to get some lessons there. But it's not going to build the kind of housing at the magnitude of housing we needed, and that's for that reason, Speaker, I will be voting against that motion.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Deputy House Leader.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And, you know, I listened with interest to the comments that the Parliamentary Secretary just made, because he told a much different story than what the Leader of the Opposition is saying. Leader of the Opposition is being very accusatory that there's bureaucracy and red tape at city halls, which is preventing building from occurring. And nobody, I think, is really denying that. And the example that he gave of a developer talking about going back and a planning application had to be reviewed and then reviewed again, nobody's denying that. But what we're saying is that the Housing Accelerator Fund is specifically designed. I know in Kingston, the money that was given to the municipality was tied to reducing that red tape to ensure that more would get built quicker, to reduce exactly those kind of problems that he indicated. I'm wondering if the Parliamentary Secretary can provide some of his thoughts into that, and why it's so important, and more importantly, why there's over 15 Conservatives who want and have been advocating for this money for their ridings. Clearly, they must see that it works. At least the correspondence that they sent to the Minister indicated that they thought that that money would work for the intended purpose. Otherwise, why would they be asking for it?
Good point.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you very much, Speaker. I want to thank the member from the Kingston Islands. I think he's absolutely right, and he cited Kingston as an example. I can cite Ottawa as an example. In fact, I wonder, the Leader of the Opposition, the member for Carlton, he and I share the same city as home, whether he's spoken with our Mayor, Mark Sutcliffe, about this issue and what Mayor Sutcliffe's response would be, because the money that we have given, for example, very small part of that money is going towards streamlining the entire process of approving projects, which builders and developers actually want. They want is.
So once again, why is anybody actually listening to anything this guy has to say when he's the Secretary of Health? He's debating homes. This isn't his playing field. Why is he here?
As a right by default, not to mention even higher density on bigger size of lots, so that you can leverage the infrastructure that's available. But then a larger proportion of that money is going towards actually building affordable housing. That's the point. We are able to accomplish it both. What he is doing essentially, in many senses,
This guy probably hasn't picked up a hammer in his entire life.
For developers, because they're not going to pass those savings to the consumers.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Bruce Grey, Owen Sound.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. I got two quick questions and a comment for the member opposite. So he was expounding on the importance of the Housing Accelerator Fund. It's supposed to be an equitable fund out to all ridings across the country. I'd just like him to name one Conservative-held riding in Ontario that got a single penny of the Housing Accelerator Fund. Number two, because he thinks this is such a great fund, how many houses have been built in his riding with the Housing Accelerator Fund? And my last point, Madam Speaker, is just a comment. He mentioned that our proposal, the Leader of the Opposition's proposal, that it will save $5,000 on $1 million house. 5% of $1 million is $50,000, not $5,000. Thanks, Madam Speaker.
Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you very much, Speaker. I thank the member opposite for asking the question. I enjoy working with him, and I appreciate his public service. And I'll say to him, there's a lot of examples, and I can take him on a tour one of these weekends if he likes to in my riding. I mentioned already Gladstone Village, which is right on Somerset and Preston. You will see cranes are up. That housing, affordable housing, is going because of Housing Accelerator Fund. You can go on Rochester and Gladstone by Adult High School. You will see there's housing that's getting built. Phase 1 is already up. Phase 2 is going up. That Housing Accelerator Fund. I can take you to La Breton Flag just down the road. There's 2 cranes up right now, and there's 2 towers that's going up. That's called Dream La Breton. And Multi-Faith Housing Initiative is the not-for-profit housing provider. That's Housing Accelerator Fund. If you like, I can go through many other lists of actual housing, and I'll get you a list of all the conservative ridings that are benefiting from Housing Accelerator Fund as well.
Questions et commentaires, l'honorable.
The honourable member for Repentigny. Terrebonne, rather. No, Repentigny, I was right. Thérèse de Blainville, sorry. The most beautiful riding of them all, Madam Speaker. Well, there's a proposal right now from the Conservatives to eliminate GST on new home builds, on condos. Well, the question that we need to ask is, will this actually contribute to the increase in demand for social housing? And I've understood, that the Liberals have talked about many of their programs, the Accelerator Fund, etc. But one of the problems with these programs is that we're not able to see the results because it takes a very long time, because the federal government has decided to invest, but with 56,000 conditions. So, this should be Quebec's jurisdiction and municipal jurisdiction. So how can the member answer for these Liberal government strategies? How can they suggest that they are more efficient than something like cutting the GST? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Opposite for her question, and I will say to you that we have such a big challenge right now in terms of building housing across this country that we need all 3 orders of government working together. She's absolutely right. Of course, rules around how housing is built, the actual housing is a provincial and municipal issue, but we are working with provincial and municipal governments to create those incentives so that we can increase the supply to reduce the demand on housing.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for King's Heads.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We're here today to discuss an Opposition Day motion from the Conservative Party in relation to housing. And I will say I welcome the opportunity to rise here in this place and talk about the importance of housing, because this is a national conversation right now. And I want to give some context to my own riding in King's Heads. I was elected in 2019, and Madam Speaker, I remember going to communities, particularly in rural parts of my riding, in Hants County and Kings County, and you would have conversations. You'd knock on the door and people would say, Cody, look, I'm worried that I'm not going to be able to actually sell my home. It's been on the market for a year or two. No one seems to want to buy it. I think fortunately,
because nobody can afford it
in Nova Scotia, at least in the Annapolis Valley and in Hants County, that's no longer a problem because there has been a growth and an interest in people who want to live in rural Nova Scotia, I would say rural Atlantic Canada, and particularly...
I bet none of these people actually live in apartments right now. I bet all of these MPs live in nice big houses. They've never had to deal with that shit. Sitting here debating building homes, and they're building apartment complexes. They're building communist block complexes. What the hell are they thinking?
And wanting to welcome newcomers to our province. It may sound like a very modest number, Madam Speaker.
These people are so incredibly out of touch. It makes me absolutely sick.
That had been a number that projections were actually showing our population was going to be decreasing. So I think as Nova Scotians, we should be welcoming the fact that people want to live in our communities. I live in East Hants, one of the fastest growing municipalities in Atlantic Canada. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we have the proper housing and infrastructure and social services to keep pace. And this is what this conversation is about today. The Conservatives have put on the table a suggestion that the government should move forward with a GST cut for new built homes in the country up to $1 million. And I'll be honest, in and of itself, that idea is not a terrible one. But the catch is what the fine print that the Conservatives don't put in the Opposition Day motion, which they've said outside of this place, which is the way that they would go about paying for that type of expenditure would to actually be to cut the programs that are driving supply. And I think it's extremely important for Canadians at home to understand that when you rob Peter to pay Paul, that's not getting us any further ahead, is it? And in fact, it's actually narrowing the amount of Canadians that could benefit from a housing initiative. Because, Madam Speaker, there are a lot of people, I'm one of the younger members of Parliament in this House, there are a lot of people in my age bracket that are looking to buy their first home, looking to get in and start a family. They may not be in a position to buy or purchase a brand new built home. And so one of the things so far in the debate that I have not heard the Conservatives address is why are we going so narrow just on newly built homes? Why is this not an affordability measure that's extended all the way across? And why are they proposing to actually get rid of the programs that are increasing supply that could actually help support this initiative in the first place? Because by stunting the ability to actually build the supply, they're narrowing the benefit that they would even be offering as part of their public policy choice to Canadians. So I think that that is first and foremost. The Conservatives have to be able to be clear. Why are you cutting the programs that are important for the supply that's needed? We've heard premiers, we've heard, frankly, all members of Parliament on all sides of this House say that we need more supply in this country. I agree. So why are we taking away the programs that are doing just that? And I do think that this gives us an opportunity to examine the programs that the government has put out. Madam Speaker, I would suggest, I'm not the housing minister, but I would suggest that the government kind of has 4 different cadres of initiatives that they've put out. We have put out support directly to developers to build, whether that be in very low-cost financing for developers to be able to build either new homes or new rental units, whether or not that has been money directly to the provinces to support public housing. Part of the reason why we're in this situation, Madam Speaker, for about 35 years, frankly, starting with the Chrétien government, and I have a lot of respect for Mr. Chrétien. I think his government was good for this country, but there was an exodus of federal involvement in social and public housing. And it is this government that has sought to actually return. These things don't turn around overnight, but that's part of the reason why we find ourselves in the situation that we do. The third element is working directly with municipalities, whether or not that's providing the infrastructure that's needed for housing, whether or not that is putting money on the table that is actually tied incentives. And we've heard a lot that the Conservatives want to sit down and negotiate with the municipalities, withhold federal funding. Well, on the positive side of the stick, that's exactly what this government is doing. It is sitting down with municipalities, putting in funding that is conditional on homes getting built in their local area. It's not pulling back federal funding if you don't hit a 15% target. And I'll get into more of what the the member from Carleton's plan actually entails, which experts have said would build less housing in this country, not more. And it's actually a very benign policy. So I'll get into that. Last is we're working directly with the people who would buy the homes, primarily young Canadians, with the first home buyers savings account, with a number of initiatives to try to help support young Canadians get into a home and ways that they can save up tax-free to do just that. So what is the evidence, Madam Speaker, of our plan working? Well, in Nova Scotia, good news. In 2023, Nova Scotia had the most housing starts since 1940. Let me repeat that. That is Nova Scotia, our province, by virtue of federal leadership on this file, had the most housing starts since 1940 in the last 87 years. And even better news, Madam Speaker, Nova Scotia is actually on pace to exceed that in 2024. So I can see concretely in my own backyard the work that the federal program is doing to increase supply. Now, we know it can't just be supply, Madam Speaker. Yes, that is important, and that in and of itself will create more of an affordability context for Canadians, but we have targeted programs to actually help with affordable housing units themselves. And what the Conservative Party is actually offering my constituents, Madam Speaker, is to cut the programs that are actually promising to help deliver almost 5,000 new housing units in King's Hants over the next decade. The Leader of the
Yeah, sadly, some of these guys are still babbling on. If you guys are new to the stream, make sure you hit that like button, hit that sub button. Thank you all for joining. We are currently waiting for the non-confidence vote to happen. It should be, hopefully, some point today. Today's going to be a very big day. I doubt it's going to pass, but if it does, celebrations all around.
As a municipal councillor, is he suggesting that he's incompetent as well? I'd like to know the answer on that because, of course, he was part of the Kings County Council that welcomed the federal investment in housing to build more housing in Kings Hants. So I don't think it is constructive, Madam Speaker, when you have someone who wants to be the Prime Minister of this country who's going to well, just be able to try to beat up every other level of government. It's not the type of leadership we should expect in this country. It's not the type of way that we should see going about it. But I want to get to his plan, because here is the ridiculousness of his plan. I see I have 2 minutes left. His private member's bill, which has widely been critiqued by housing advocates in this country as being ineffectual compared to the government programs, actually proposes that if you don't build 15% more housing, then you don't get federal funds. So the irony in that is, example A would be a municipality that is actually doing very well, working in a pro-development sense to build new housing. They built 50 houses, or let's just say 100 to make the numbers real easy. They built 100 houses in 2024. Under the Leader of the Official Opposition's program, if they didn't build 115 in the next year, he wouldn't give them any federal money to help support the continued growth. But yet a municipality that perhaps was underperforming, doing terrible, standing in the way, the big bureaucracy that he screams against would only have to build, let's say they built 5 houses. They'd only have to build 1 more in order to get his 15% funding on the Government of Canada side. It makes absolutely no sense, and it is the result of policy and slogans being written on the back of a napkin, Madam Speaker. It is not good public policy. And so I do welcome, as the member from Ottawa, Senator said, a conversation on housing, but let's have a conversation about concrete ways about how we get out of this situation. And it is not going to be by cutting programs that are actually helping to build more housing in this country. It's not by cutting programs that are helping on affordable housing units and suggesting that you're going to cut funding from municipalities that actually in many cases need the critical infrastructure to build out. It's easy to say you want to build a house, but if you don't have the wastewater and water infrastructure to do it, it's not going to happen. So, Madam Speaker, I see I'm coming to the end of my time. Wish I had more, but I look forward to taking questions from my honourable colleagues.
Good job, good job. Yes, questions and comments. The honourable member for Brandon Souris.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and thanks to my colleague for his presentation. You know, after 9 years, he made some good points, but after 9 years, there has been very few homes built in Canada to come anywhere near keeping pace with the need. And so I'm just wondering if the member from Nova Scotia can just indicate to us why they haven't been anywhere near successful in meeting the demand. That's very obvious in the fact that the only thing that has happened is rents have doubled and mortgages have doubled and the housing costs have doubled, and yet they don't think that taking the GST off of any homes that are built below $1 million would be helpful. It certainly would be to the young people I speak to.
Member for Kings Hants.
I actually think the proposal as is would be helpful, but what my speech gave the level of nuances, and I hope the member from Brandon Souris can have a conversation with the Leader of the Official Opposition and say, look, it's fine if we want to do this policy, but we should not do it on the back of actually cutting the federal funding that's helping to build the homes that would be necessary for people to take advantage of the tax credit that we're putting in place, or the GST relief. And so we have built 500,000 homes in this country, Madam Speaker. There are a lot of good initiatives. There is issues around Western liberal democracies right now around home building. A lot of it came on the backside of the pandemic, where we did not have supply by virtue of almost 30 years of governments of Canada, successive, Liberal and Conservative, getting out of the space of federal housing. And at a time when interest rates from the central banks went very low, housing prices took off because of the fact that mortgage lending space opened up and there wasn't enough supply. But the way to get there is not by actually cutting the programs that build the supply for the homes that we need.
Questions and comments? The honourable member. Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, at the end of the day, this is a way for the Conservatives to pass the bill onto the provinces and onto Quebec with $18 billion in new housing starts, we'd end up with about the same amount that it will cost to build about 20,000 social housing units. So I'd like to know what my colleague thinks of that. The Honourable Member for King's Hands. Unfortunately, I missed part of the question from my honourable colleague, but in terms of the importance of investments, in terms of social housing, absolutely. Social and public housing is more important, and that's exactly why we have this problem. Because for 30 years, Conservative and Liberal federal governments didn't invest enough in non-governmental organizations or in the provinces to build public housing.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, I share my colleagues' concerns with some of the language that's being used by the Conservative leader. I mean, I look at Mayor Scott Goodmanson of Langford, Mayor Michelle Staples of Duncan, Mayor Rob Douglas of North Cowichan, Mayor Tim McGonigal of Lake Cowichan. These individuals and their councils are people I value incredibly, and I have a great working relationship. One of the other provinces that's doing great work, of course, is the BC NDP in British Columbia, because our housing starts right now are 40% higher than they were under the previous government. We're leading the way on tax measures designed to clamp down on speculation, and the province has stepped in to change the zoning laws where some municipalities are not keeping up with the demand. But through you, Madam Speaker, I'm just wondering if my colleague thinks maybe there are additional measures. Maybe we need to look to our past for examples. During the Second World War and immediately following the Second World War, the federal government stepped in with the creation of a Crown Corporation to deal with returning veterans and the influx of workers to our cities who are helping with the war effort. Through you, Madam Speaker, does he think that such a measure might be beneficial here and now, at least an idea to be considered, given the housing crunch that we are currently facing and the fact that the market has not met the demand?
The Honourable Member for King's Hands.
Well, things, Madam Speaker, I would agree in concern around the criticism of our local mayors and people who step up to serve our communities. I think the member from Carleton should actually stand in this place and start naming the ones. Is it my mayors? Is it the member from Malahat, Cowichan? Is it his mayors? Who is this member talking about? He likes the boogeyman, but these are people trying to serve their communities, and we as federal representatives should be trying to provide support to build the housing that's needed. In relation to the question around a Crown Corp, whether or not we create another Crown agency, I don't know, but I do like the way that the Minister of Housing has put on the idea of using federal lands and using federal resources in a public sense to be able to try to build more housing. I do think we have to utilize all tools at our disposal. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Berthier-Mesquite-Angers. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Very pleased to rise today on the Conservative motion here before us with regards to housing. Everyone here in the House, well, most of us at the very least, take housing to heart. Yes, I'll be sharing my time. I was getting to it, Madam Speaker. Everyone here has housing at heart. We all have different ways of getting to the results we want. Someone that will give us great information on this is the legendary member for Jonquière, who is recognized for his strength in speech giving, and I'll be sharing my time with him. So, Madam Speaker, we agree with the principle of this motion. We agree with the principle, but we have problems with the way it has been drafted. When provinces are being asked, for example, to abolish provincial sales tax, this motion asks Quebec to abolish the sales tax for new homes. But it's not up to the federal government to tell provinces and to tell Quebec what to do. It's especially not the federal government's job. In the current tense situation, the desperate situation of budgetary imbalance between the levels of government, one of the best illustrations of the fact that we are in a budget disbalance is that just a few days ago, the Prime Minister made an announcement. He said he wanted to see a 3-month GST reduction or elimination for a whole range of products. He also wants to give a $250 check to everyone who earns $150,000 or less net. A rather ridiculous measure, if you ask me. But that very same day, Madam Speaker, this actually happened. The Quebec Finance Minister deplored the fact that there was not enough money to fund the healthcare and education system. So he was asking his...
Not enough money to fund the education and healthcare system. Maybe because we keep sending billions to places like Brazil. $3.5 billion to Brazil and their foreign companies.
We live in today, and we've lived in this Canada for far too long. Things have to change.
Or maybe send another $5 billion to Ukraine. That'll help Canadians here.
The federal government cannot tell the province what to do, but it can still eliminate GST on new builds, which could be a positive thing, federally. Only 30% of the market are new houses, so it'll have a limited impact on the market. What we must not also forget is that the housing market in Quebec and in Canada in general is currently in a situation where there isn't enough supply. It's a hot market. There's been a huge inflation of house prices. 68% increase in Quebec over the last 3 years, Madam Speaker. 68%. That's a lot. Huge increase. Where does that come from? Well, it's because for every house there's 22 buyers. They offer a price, they know they'll be in competition with others, and so they increase their bids, which increases the prices, and this will have an impact on future house prices and future house transactions. So this is a very important issue. Removing GST on new builds could perhaps allow for some breathing room, but we're afraid that this amount, these savings will only go into the pocket of builders and sellers. So we're concerned. We can't be against motherhood and apple pie. So making housing easier to access, well, we can't vote against that. And that's why we will support this motion with major reservations. We could amend the motion so it doesn't talk about the provinces. Madam Speaker, there's a crying need for housing units in Canada. Now let's talk percentages. The Liberal government implemented a number of programs to make access to housing easier. The Conservative leader wants to cut these programs as quickly as possible to reduce to allow this GST reduction. I don't think that's the right way of doing things, but even in these programs, Quebec doesn't get its just part. Quebec represents 22% of Canada's population, but only received 14% of CMHC monies. So 22% of the population, but only 14% of the money. And for affordable housing, it only received 6% of total funding. For a population that represents 22% of Canada, these numbers are terrible. But it gets even worse, Madam Speaker, because the CMHC states that Canada's housing needs are 31% of Canada's housing needs are in Quebec. Quebec is always expected to pay more for programs in other provinces because there might be a lower population elsewhere. We want there to be universal services from coast to coast to coast. But when it's time for Quebec to get its just part, Quebec isn't getting the 31%.
All right, I don't know about you guys, but I am kind of tired of listening to Frenchie speak, so I want to listen to the rest of this Polyev video here, and he's speaking to reporters, so let's take a listen.
Liberals, 35 homeless encampments in Halifax after 9 years of Trudeau and the NDP Liberals. 2 million people line up at food banks. A quarter of our kids are going to school hungry, and a quarter of parents are skipping meals so their kids don't have to. Those same parents toss and turn at night because they are the most indebted households in the G7. By far, it's not even close. And then our own debt, a national debt, has doubled. Trudeau and the NDP Liberals have added more debt than all prior prime ministers combined. And now they won't even tell us how big the debt or the deficit is. Crime, chaos, drugs, and disorder now spill into our once safe streets, with rampant repeat offenders out killing, maiming, raping, and decimating our communities. Our once safe and tranquil communities. Hate crimes are up 256%, with church burnings, fire bombings of synagogues, and attacks on other places of worship now out of control. With all this damage, with everything that Justin Trudeau and the NDP Liberals have done to make life more costly and dangerous, it would be unrealistic for me to ask them to improve the situation in their upcoming fall economic update. So, I have a more realistic request. Actually, it's more of a plea. Stop. Just stop. Stop adding inflationary spending that balloons the cost of living. Stop your carbon tax hikes.
Get some help.
Stop taxing home purchases. Stop adding dangerous and irresponsible debt that threatens our social programs. Everything you're doing, Justin Trudeau, just stop doing it in this fall update until common sense Conservatives can start fixing everything you broke. There will be a carbon tax election. And in that election, there will be a very simple choice. Either we go ahead with quadrupling the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre, driving hundreds of billions of dollars and millions of jobs to America and driving our people to starvation. Or common sense Conservatives who will axe the tax. That's why it's a carbon tax election. 61 cent a litre carbon tax with the NDP Liberals, zero carbon tax with the Conservatives. The choice again, an NDP Liberal government who will tax your food, punish your work, double your housing cost, and unleash crime in your community, or common sense Conservatives who will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. Our common sense Conservatives will take the GST off new homes to save you up to 50 grand on a purchase and stimulate an extra 50,000 apartment and housing builds every single year. We will cap spending, cut bureaucracy and waste to fix the budget. We will stop the crime by locking up violent repeat offenders, securing our borders, and banning hard drugs. In essence, we will bring home Canada's promise, a very simple promise, that hard work earns you a powerful paycheck and pension that buys affordable food, gas, and homes in safe neighborhoods in the freest country on earth, Canada. Let's bring it home.
Thank you. We'll now take questions from the floor.
Good morning, Mr. Polyev. JP Tasker from CBC News. In an interview this morning, Donald Trump again floated the idea of Canada becoming the 51st state of the United States. Are you concerned that the president-elect repeatedly brings up this idea of annexing our country?
Well, the bottom line is that Justin Trudeau is a weak leader, and he gains no respect from countries all around the world. Canada should have a strong, smart leader with the brains and backbone to put our country first. And that's what I will do. We will have common sense Conservatives will put Canada first. We will remove the crippling taxes and debt that have weakened our country under Trudeau. We will unleash the production of our resources to make ourselves more economically independent. We will rebuild our military and secure our borders, and we will go into negotiations with our American friends in a position of strength rather than weakness. Canada will be independent, strong, and proud, and our flag, the maple leaf, will fly proudly again over our country. Thank you.
Can I get that French too, please, sir?
Okay, so I'm obviously going to skip over the French, but it's a joke. Everybody calm down. Trump isn't going to annex Canada. Everybody just breathe. Relax. CBC trying to blow things out of proportion like they always do. This is why they need to go. This is why the mainstream media needs to disappear, and they slowly but surely are.
Morning, Colton Parrell, CTV. Last night, your MP, Jamil Javani, posted about a great conversation he had with the U.S. Vice President-elect. Did he advocate against the imposition of U.S. tariffs? And who are you reaching out to in the incoming Trump administration to do the same?
I wasn't at that meeting, so I don't have an answer to that question. And who are you reaching out to? I haven't.
Thank you. Next question.
Just on the point of Mr. Mackenzie here from Global News, just on the point about Mr. Giovanni's meeting with J.D. Vance, you didn't instruct him at all to bring up the idea of that 25% tariffs are bad. You'd said previously that you'd tell any American that you or conservatives would speak with that they would be a bad idea.
Every single conservative would tell every single American that a tariff on Canada is a bad idea. We need to put Canada first, and that's what we will do. We will fight these tariffs from a position of strength. We will unleash the production of our resources. We will cut taxes on our workers, our businesses, to bring home more production to this country. We will stand shoulder to shoulder with the men and women in uniform by rebuilding our forces, and we will reinforce our border, all of which will put Canada in a position of strength and reverse the weakness that Justin Trudeau has brought to our country after 9 years of weak leadership. So every conservative tells every American that tariffs on our country are a bad idea, and when I'm Prime Minister, we will have a strong Canada First policy in order to fight those tariffs and to fight for Canadians.
Thank you. This will be the final question.
Jim Brodscale, the Canadian Press. Good morning. Do you have any thoughts on the fall of the Assad regime in Syria and anything that Canada could or should do to help restore stability to the region?
Well, first of all,
just leave it alone. Don't even get involved in Syria. Just let it do its thing.
Assad
My
was a
God,
puppet.
we need to stop involving ourselves with all of these conflicts when we have things here that we can't even deal with. We cannot save every single country. I'm sorry. We have people here starving. We have people here struggling to get by day by day. People can't even afford houses. And this guy is going to go out, this Canadian press reporter is going to sit here talking about Syria and how Canada can help Syria. Stop. Stop.
But for the tyrants of Tehran, he has carried out genocides against the Sunni people in his own country, and now he appears to have been toppled. We don't know who will replace him, but I don't think we should get involved in that mess.
Exactly. We should not get involved. One dictator gets toppled by another. One extremist group rolls in and takes out another. Let's just not get involved. All right, that's the end of that. Let's get back into the CPAC here, shall we?
That we have before us a motion.
Oh my God, the Frenchies are still talking. I thought that would have been a nice little break, but no, clearly not.
Every opportunity to make this government topple. I'm not quite sure what's going on, but at least there is some continuity, Madam Speaker, because when I see the motion before us today, I believe that this is a typical motion from the Conservatives. It's what I call the member for Carleton's technique. What does this technique look like? It's about focusing on populist proposals that are based on simplistic considerations to meet to meet the needs of complex problems. Whenever I have conservative motions before me, that's what it looks like. The oversimplification of a complex.
It's actually funny, I just read one of those comments in the chat there. So somebody said all the Syrian refugees can go back now. This is a video of an Irishman asking Syrian refugees if they're going to go back now. So let's take a listen.
What's going on here? What's this all about?
So for the past few decades we've been under constant oppression by Bashar al-Assad, the dictator of Syria.
Yeah.
He's been imprisoning civilians, he's been murdering, torturing, massacring everybody left and right.
All right.
So since this morning, since 2 a.m., we've reclaimed Damascus, Damascus being the capital of Syria.
Yes, yeah, I understand.
So the entire country is free now.
So you're free now?
We are free now.
So
finally.
Finally. So now does that mean all you go back to Syria now?
The economic situation isn't good.
Okay. So it's economic reasons. You're in Ireland, economic reasons.
We hope we can go back. We wish we can go back.
I'm sure you can go back now that you're free from
finally
occupation or whatever dictatorship. Take care. There you go.
So they're sitting there celebrating that they're free from the occupation, but the economics aren't good enough to go back yet. Okay.
Sometimes people get together in a group and try to cast a spell by chanting together. That's about what this amounts to. And what do these incantations amount to? We already know that they talk about axing the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. I don't know exactly what you need to fix the budget. A drill and a screwdriver or what? Whenever I hear the leader of the Conservative Party, I think about the filmmaker Truffaut. There's a film by him called Les Baisers Volés with a character called Antoine Doinel. He desires Fabienne Tabar. And so, during a lengthy scene in the film.
Well, the way I look at it is the economic situation will never get better over there, so they're never going to go back. That's simply what that comes down to.
Name in the mirror. And yet, in the end, his lubricious desires come to nothing. I feel like this is a cheap remake of a Truffaut film when I hear the leader of the opposition repeating his political slogans ad nauseum. And yet in the end, all we're really getting from him are cosmetic solutions. Because when you have a complex political situation, you need structural solutions. And although we will be voting for the Conservative motion, however, I don't think this is a structural idea. First of all, I listened to the Conservative's speech earlier. He said that we need to do something about red tape. We know that populists love to say what the leader of the opposition said. He said politicians want to steal hard-working workers' money. Of course, what the leader of the opposition often seems to forget to say is that we're also getting services thanks to our taxes. No, he doesn't like to talk about that. So he's saying he wants to take money from politicians to give it directly to taxpayers. Give it directly back to workers. Well, I have another way to interpret his proposal. My sense is that what the leader of the official opposition is doing is trying to fund a populist measure on the backs of provinces. Because if you look at the end of the motion, what you see is that the member for Carleton clearly wants to ensure that provincial premiers would also remove their provincial sales taxes on new housing builds. It's problematic. Think of the Quebec context. Housing starts projections for next year are projected to total $18 billion. Now, if you take the provincial sales tax off that, there would be a $1.8 billion gap for Quebec. So the leader of the opposition doesn't mention it, But in his motion, he's asking the government of Quebec to give up $1.8 billion at the very time when the deficit has reached nearly $13 billion. We can see that people of sense can't accept this. There's something very simple in our federation, the tax imbalance. What does the federal government constantly do when it needs to tighten its belt? Well, it cuts its transfers to provinces. And it makes a policy so that the financial burden falls on provinces. And Jean Chrétien, in fact, said that this was an amazing idea because you don't have to pay a political price for it. So it goes back years and years. So Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the opposition, says that he will give more money back to taxpayers. But actually, he's going to take it from the provinces who are already struggling to meet their own areas of jurisdiction, like education and healthcare, which are struggling. Childcare in Quebec. So if we take $1.8 billion away from Quebec and increase its deficit, we will once again be placing further strain on the government of Quebec, which has the mission of creating a better social safety net to help families who are already having difficulties. You can't give with one hand and take away with the other. If you give people some money but take away other social services they need, that's no good. So this won't do anything to fix the tax imbalance, the fiscal imbalance, and with this $1.8 billion, Quebec could actually fund 20,000 units of social housing. So in a way, the leader of the opposition would be taking...
What the hell is social housing? Like apartment buildings and condos? Is that what that is?
So, in our opinion...
Social housing, aka socialist housing, aka communism.
This conservative motion could perhaps be amended. I'll get back to you on this. And why is this not a structural policy? Because our conservative colleagues never seem to do something about the actual problem. What led to the housing crisis in Quebec? Immigration created a large amount of the problem. I have never heard my conservative colleagues get up to criticize the Century Initiative. The Liberal Party's seeming desire to ensure that we ultimately completely lose control over immigration to Quebec and place unprecedented pressure on its social services. And yet the Conservatives don't seem to want to do anything about that. The Conservatives aren't doing something about the central problem. Actually, they've brought it up a little bit recently, but basically they don't. And another thing they haven't mentioned is the problem raised by the Canadian Construction Association, who at various meetings clearly stated that we need infrastructure. You can't just treat construction as if it exists in a silo. And the cost of infrastructure would be so high that we might actually need $128 billion in order to build that infrastructure. And we also need to consider the fact that if we want better municipal infrastructure, we also need to help municipalities get the funding they need. So I think we should therefore amend the motion as follows, Madam Speaker, that the motion be amended by removing the words and call on the provincial premiers to match this proposal.
C'est bien?
That's the amendment. Is that good?
Sit down, Frenchie. Nobody wants to listen to you anymore. My God. Guy went on a tangent. Hopefully everybody's having a fantastic day. Question period is going to be coming up very, very soon.
Je dois informer les honorables députés.
I wish to inform honorable members that an amendment to an opposition motion can only be presented with the consent of the sponsor of the motion, or in their absence, the House Leader, the Whip, or the Deputy Whip of their party. Since none of these individuals is present in the House to give their consent, the amendment is not is not in order at this time. Questions and comments?
Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, so thank you, Madam Speaker. One of the things that I have found disrespectful coming from the official opposition is the fact that they're completely ignoring, and I would suggest to you, abusing our other levels of government. We have the current leader of the Conservative Party, who is likely the worst ever Minister of Housing when he was the Minister of Housing since World War II, even pre-World War II. And at the same time now, he's downplaying the importance of the Accelerator Fund.
Did Kevin just try to compare Pierre to people building houses back before World War II? What the hell is this guy on?
In regards to when governments work together.
We're not even in the same realm at that point.
Accelerator Fund is something that's good.
Like, what was that comparison?
The honourable member for Jonquière. It's quite rare that I agree with the member for Winnipeg.
Kevin just always makes shit up. He's such a weirdo.
For once, and I'm sorry to be mean, but he actually said something sensible for once. Calling mayors of major cities incompetent is not the way you're going to lead to more housing builds. But like I was saying, I call this the Carleton method. Either he intones slogans or he simply insults people. We're used to that kind of thing from him. I don't know if he's planning to change his style. I would encourage him to do that. And for once, to propose ideas that no longer simply represent unbridled populism that doesn't actually help anyone.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Cowichan, Malahat-Langford.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I very much enjoyed my colleague's reference to the Carleton method, and in some quarters of Ottawa also known as the Stornoway method. And I'd caution him on repeating Conservative slogans, because otherwise the Conservative Whip's office might come and give him a gold star. But I do share his concerns that what the Conservatives are proposing these days does not have a lot of substance to it. It might look good on the surface.
No, trust me, I get that houses from then are still standing now, but to compare Pierre as a housing minister in 2016 or 15 to some dude or people building houses before World War II, like, what kind of crackhead idea is that? Where is he thinking?
Into this, it needs to be a wholesale structural rethinking of how the federal government interacts with both the provinces and the municipalities. It can't be one based on petty insults and grievances, but one where there's that collaborative working together. Thank you.
Député Jonquière.
The honourable member for Jonquière. The best long-term solution would be Quebec independence, in my opinion. However, in order to avoid being partisan, what we do need is to ensure that the people who know the most about construction, like municipalities and the government of Quebec, have the most autonomy in order to be able to use the knowledge they have about infrastructure needs and housing needs. But instead, we're seeing the exact opposite. It's the opposite of what we heard earlier from the leader of the opposition, who said that he wants to take money away from politicians and instead give it to workers. He wants to give that money directly to workers through a tax credit. That's all very well, but if you don't have the infrastructure to build houses, it's not going to get very far. The Carleton method is extremely populist.
This guy's trying to defend his paycheck right now. That's what this really comes down to. Pierre wants to cut MPs and their pensions and paychecks, and he's sitting there trying to defend that right now. He wants his money. This bloc member is no better than Jagmeet.
The good thing about this motion is that it speaks about the housing crisis we're going through. But I'm not sure that this motion to eliminate
And this woman, she doesn't even have her eyes open.
or actually lead to more construction, especially not construction of social housing.
She can't even see who she's talking
the
to.
Liberals don't mind at all just squabbling with the Conservatives because their own strategy doesn't work either. I'd like to hear from my colleague. We know that there's been a homelessness crisis, and we know that this government has added $250 million to a program to reduce homelessness, but with strings attached. Very unfortunate conditions. It's ridiculous to add this type of red tape when people are living in homeless encampments in the streets of Quebec. I'd like to hear from my colleague on this. The honourable member. My colleague is absolutely right. She asked the question.
Yeah, Trudeau's housing plan are the tent cities that are popping up everywhere.
They add a series of poorly thought out conditions to all sorts of programs without actually considering the needs of municipalities. Meanwhile, the Conservatives want to starve the provinces in Quebec of the resources they need. It wants to make them pay the bill. That's all the time we have. Resuming debate.
The honourable member for New Westminster Burnaby.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I only have a few moments. So first of all, I'd like to say that it is the Conservative Party that added the GST to home build, and now they want to take it away again. This is an excellent example of their lack of sincerity. In addition, none of the sponsors of this motion are in the House, which means that the Bloc Québécois amendment was not deemed in order.
Member, I have a point of order from the honourable member for Bruce Grey and Sound.
Yeah, the leader of the NDP fully understands that he cannot refer to a person's presence in this chamber.
I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention. I was hearing someone else. No, I was hearing advice. Yes, the honourable member knows that we can't refer to presences or absences in the House.
What a lame thing you can't do.
Not able to be proposed. I will be proposing another one in 2 minutes. I would expect the House Leader, the Deputy House Leader, the Whip or the Deputy Whip of the Conservative Party to be here. If they take this motion seriously, that is how it...
Again, the honourable member knows we cannot mention presences or absences in the House. The honourable member can say that they would accept or not. But yes, thank you.
Chair, I am just repeating your words, which were in order. And that is why I'm going to be proposing the motion that the fact that the Conservatives imposed the GST on new homes, and now they're proposing to take it off, is, I think, a bit passing strange. The Conservatives have never apologized for doing that. Neither have they apologized for refusing to support what the NDP has been pushing on taking the GST off family essentials, off telecom, off home heating, all of those things that Conservatives, they say that they're concerned about the cost of living, but aside from 12 words that they use in their multiple slogans, they haven't shown sincerity in any of these cases in actually doing something that helped people. Madam Speaker, of course, with the NDP, Conservative constituents have gotten dental care. They're getting pharmacare now, anti-scab legislation, affordable housing, and the NDP has proposed, and Conservatives will be voting shortly, on whether or not to ensure that the GST is taken off family essentials. The NDP wants to make that permanent, and the Conservatives will be judged on how they vote shortly. So, Madam Speaker, without further ado, I would like to amend the motion in the following way, and this is seconded by the terrific member from London Fanshawe, that the motion be amended by replacing the word homes with the words principal residences, que la motion soit amendée par...
That the motion be amended by substituting the word house by the words principal residence. I would like to propose that because there's a lack of clarity in this motion. We need more precision in this motion to see if it applies to houses or residences.
Duty to inform honourable members that an amendment to an opposition motion may be moved only with the consent of the sponsor of the motion, or in the case that he or she is not present, consent may be given or denied by the House Leader, the Deputy House Leader, the Whip, or the Deputy Whip, or of the sponsor's party. Since none of these members have risen in the chamber to give their consent, the amendment cannot be moved at this time. The honourable member will have 2 minutes for questions and comments. Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Barrie Innisfil.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Leader of the Opposition's proposal to remove the GST on home sales has been universally accepted as a good plan, a plan that puts money back in the pockets of potential homeowners. Does the honourable member not agree that this would be a good plan to put the money back in the pockets of people who are buying homes so that they can afford them?
Honourable member from New Westminster Burnaby.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Greg is here now.
The problem is the Conservatives did this in the first place. They imposed the GST on new homes. And so now Conservatives are standing up and saying, we made a mistake. The NDP certainly agrees. The Conservatives have made a hell of a lot of mistakes. This is only one of so many of the mistakes that they have made. But the fact that we have now had a number of amendments in good faith from a number of parties, including the Bloc and the NDP, and not a single Conservative proposer or the House Leader or the Deputy House Leader or the Whip or the Deputy Whip have been even in the House shows how seriously Conservatives take this motion today.
I hate to interrupt this exchange. There will be 8 minutes and 50 seconds left in questions and comments when the debate resumes. Déclaration de député, statements, members. The honourable member for an opinion.
Mr. Speaker, on November 13th, Somaliland held its presidential elections. I extend my congratulations to President-elect Abdirahman Mohamed Abdullahi Irio for his landslide victory. It is a testament to the trust and confidence the people of Somaliland have placed in his leadership. I want to recognize and thank the services of the outgoing President Muse Bihi Abdi. I also congratulate Kaha Party on winning to become one of the 3 officially recognized political parties. We are in a world where elections are often disputed, as recently witnessed in a couple of countries in Europe. The use of biometric voter identification and the peaceful transfer of power is not just a triumph for Somaliland, but a powerful inspiration to Africa and democratic countries around the world. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Edmonton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to honour the Elves Special Needs Society, an organization that's made a profound impact on so many in Edmonton. We're fortunate to have many charities and not-for-profits that serve Edmonton, and Elves stands out as truly one of the best. Recently celebrating its 50th anniversary, Elves, named for the benefactor Milton Elves and not the North Pole Elves, began with just 3 staff members and 7 children. Over years has grown to a vital service supporting over 400 learners with severe disabilities and special needs. Now with 2 facilities, Elves provides personalized education and day programs that significantly enhance the lives of individuals and their families. With more than 200 dedicated staff now, Elves continues to offer inclusive, family-centered services. For 5 decades, Elves has remained true to its commitment to service, continually adapting and evolving to the needs of our community. Elves provide hope, love, dignity, and opportunity to those who need it the most. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for St. John's East.
Mr. Speaker, I say this every year, but I can't believe it's December already. As a young girl, Christmas was a time of magic, lights, and foods that we rarely got to taste, the school nativity program, and early Christmas morning mass when I really wanted to be home with my toys. Then and now, it was a time of joy, new beginnings, and peace, and a season to remember acts of kindness. To all the frontline and essential workers, thank you for all that you do. To the many volunteers who work tirelessly for a more equitable society, thank you. To my constituents for your ongoing support, thank you. To my family, with love, thank you. And to the members visiting today, I love you. I couldn't do this without your support. To my colleagues and all in this House, I wish you all a Merry Christmas.
Oh,
The honourable member for Berthier-Masquinongé. Well, it's a great year of celebration in Berthier-Masquinongé as 3 community organizations are celebrating their 30th anniversaries. It's extraordinary. The mission of the Réseau des Aidants Naturels d'Autrey is to improve the quality of life of caregivers by offering services and a place where caregivers can exchange ideas and break their isolation. In Saint-Jean-de-Mata, the Maison des Jeunes Le Gros Orteil welcomes young people from the community. It offers them a safe environment in which they can pursue healthy activities and develop their social skills. And finally, the Centre L'Étape du Bassin de Masquinongé welcomes people struggling with addiction without judgment and in an atmosphere of mutual support. It focuses on intervention, prevention, and awareness raising. The people who make these three organizations work are making a real difference. They are changing and saving lives, Mr. Speaker. Congratulations on your 30th anniversary. Thank you for everything you do. The Honourable Member for Bourassa.
Monsieur le Président, je suis...
Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased to recognize in the House of Commons that in November, the Global Leadership Award for outstanding contributions to the accountancy profession was awarded to Ms. Sheila Fraser. Ms. Fraser was born in Quebec, and she was the first woman to be Auditor General of Canada, a position she held from 2001 to 2011. She has received numerous distinctions: C. Emeritus in 1993, Fellow of the Order of Charter.
I don't know, this guy is new. I have never seen him before on the Liberal side or in the House of Commons, period.
Degrees. Ms. Fraser has been a tireless advocate of transparency and good governance in the public and private sectors. Her career has been a model of integrity and accountability.
Sheila Fraser, Fellow CPA.
Bravo. The Honourable Member for Dufferin-Caledon.
I'm going to talk about my friend, the Honourable John McDermott. He was the Member of Parliament for Brampton-Georgetown from 1979 until 1993, and a Cabinet Minister in the Mulroney government from 1988 until 1993 when he retired. John generously gave his time in the community. He was an honorary colonel in the Lawrence Scots. He was the chair of our local hospital board. I met John in 1988 when I volunteered on his campaign when I was 17 years old. John returned that favor in spades in 2019 when he helped me get re-elected. Over the next 5 years, John became a mentor and a friend, and he shared so many amazing anecdotes with his time in Brian Mulroney's government. On Thursday night, I had the opportunity to give John a King's Coronation Medal in his hospital room, surrounded by many of his closest friends. On Friday, John passed away with his family surrounded by him. John was a true gentleman. He was a patriot. He served his country with honor and distinction. Godspeed, John, and God bless him and his family.
Good job.
The Honourable Member for Newmarket Aurora. Mr. Speaker, on November the 12th, the 28th Annual Holiday Heroes Toy and Food Drive by York Regional Police officially kicked off. Over the years, it's helped over 100,000 Canadians in need by collecting donations of cash, gift cards, toys, non-perishable food items, and children's clothing. Thank you to the Newmarket Soccer Club for hosting, and thank you to the York Regional Police, and thank you to the partners, the Salvation Army and Victim Services of York Region, who play a key role in distributing these items throughout the community. Thank you also to our community. We live in a place I am proud to call home, proud of how we support each other, and proud of our willingness to give. To quote Dr. Seuss, Christmas Day will always be just as long as we have we. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Humber River, Black Creek.
Mr. Speaker, the persecution of Ahmadi Muslims is a harsh reality in many parts of the world, where they face violence, discrimination, and the denial of their basic rights simply for practicing their faith. This injustice highlights the importance of religious freedom. Here in Canada, we are fortunate to live in a society that values and upholds this freedom. Every individual has the right to worship without fear of persecution. I am proud that many in the Ahmadiyya community, under the leadership of National President Lal Khan Malik, have chosen Humber River Black Creek to call their home. Our community is undoubtedly better for having the Ahmadiyya community amongst us, as they inspire us to their values of peace, tolerance, and community service. As Canadians, we must appreciate and protect religious freedom for all, ensuring a world where respect, understanding, and inclusion flourish. Love for all, hatred for none.
The Honourable Member for Red Deer, Lacombe.
Mr. Speaker, will the NDP leader stand by his words, or is he just a walking, talking pile of contradictions? Remember when the NDP leader said that he was going to rip up his supply and confidence deal? Oh, right, that was just a stunt for the Elmwood-Transcona by-election. As it turns out, the Prime Minister names the tune, and the NDP leader is happy to sing along. The NDP leader was happy to sing along to the tune of doubling housing costs. The NDP leader was happy to sing along to letting dangerous criminals out on bail. The NDP leader was happy to sing along to the tune of driving food bank use to an all-time high, leading to 2 million visits in just 1 month. And the NDP leader is going to sing along to the tune of quadrupling the carbon tax, driving up the cost of gas, groceries, and home heating. Will the NDP leader start singing his own tune and finally vote non-confidence so Conservatives can axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime? Or will the NDP leader sing along with the Liberals so that the Prime Minister gets the power, he gets his pensions, and Canadians get the bill?
Probably the second part.
The Honourable Member for Ottawa-Vanier. Mr. Speaker, it's with great sadness that I rise today to honour Denis Gratton, the well-known Franco-Ontarian journalist and commentator who passed away on December 7th. Originally from Vanier, Mr. Gratton was an essential voice for the community of Ottawa-Vanier and for all of Ontario's French-speaking community. With his incredible talent, he put words to our lives and gave a voice to those without a voice. He stood out through his courage, particularly when he accompanied Canadian peacekeepers to Bosnia in 1993 in the middle of the war. He played a key role in a number of historic moments, particularly in supporting the fight for the survival of the Montfort Hospital. His commitment to francophones, his humanity, and his ability to make us think, laugh, and cry will not be forgotten. Denis was much more than a journalist. He was an ambassador for our culture and for our rights. My thoughts go to his family. Thank you, Denis.
The Honourable Member for Peterborough-Kawartha.
The leader of the NDP gets his $2.2 million pension, while Canadians get the misery and the bill. The leader of the NDP continues to keep a Prime Minister in power who has doubled the cost of housing, doubled rent, created record high usage of food banks, and record high increases in child poverty.
That's right.
Why haven't we had an election? Because the leader of the NDP continues to keep that Prime Minister in power. He told Canadians he was ripping up the supply and confidence agreement, yet here we are again. You know, don't take my word for it. I'll quote the leader of the NDP. Here are his exact words. The fact is the Liberals are too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people. There is only one person responsible for keeping that Prime Minister in power despite the genuine suffering and misery Canadians are having, and that is the leader of the NDP.
Order. The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, fall economic statements were created by the Liberal Party and by the Finance Minister Paul Martin with the goal of fighting the deficit. But the legacy of Mr. Martin is being tarnished by the new practices of this incompetent Liberal government. The target of a $40 billion deficit seems to have been missed, and not by just a few bucks. The PBO now expects that the federal deficit for 24-25 will be $46.4 billion, which blows past the already astronomical targets. Canadians want this government to be held accountable so that they can see how big the deficit is. And don't forget, that deficit will be paid by future generations. A Conservative government will fix the budget by putting in place a dollar-for-a-dollar law, which will require that any new spending be compensated with an equal amount of savings. That's how Canadian families manage their finances and get to the end of the month, and that's how a Conservative government will fix the budget.
The Honourable Member for London North Centre.
A tax cut for Canadian, Mr. Speaker. That's exactly what this government is going forward with, beginning on December 14th and carrying through to February. We've heard from Canadians. We know the challenges that they've been through previous years. And in the pandemic and into the modern day, we stand with them. I stand with my constituents during this time. I know what this will mean for them. Lifting GST, HST off of the cost of groceries, off of the cost of a night out for a meal, for a family of four. Imagine what that will do at a family restaurant. Imagine what that will do, Mr. Speaker, for the entrepreneurs in those restaurants, Mr. Speaker. It's no surprise that restaurant owners across the country, including restaurant associations, are completely behind this measure. Think about a young family also, Mr. Speaker, a young family looking forward to bringing home a new little boy or girl into the household. Those car seats are expensive, Mr. Speaker. I have personal experience in that. Lifting tax on that, Mr. Speaker, is going to go a long way. That's why we did it. We're going to continue to stand there for the people of this country.
Right on.
10 years of standing for the country, huh? Is that what that was?
Mr. Speaker, I stand with all post workers across Canada and in my riding of North Island Powell River. Imagine being paid so little you can't afford the very basics for living while your bosses make hundreds of thousands of dollars every year. Why is it that management feels comfortable padding their pockets and then point the blame at those who strike? People brave enough to put themselves in a place where they are not getting paid and now have lost their benefits. Shame. I have stood on the picket line with some of these folks, and when I get home I will join them again if they are still not able to do the jobs they desperately want to do. The Conservatives will never stand on the picket line fighting alongside those brave union members who have made this country better for every single Canadian with their actions. The Liberals need to stop interrupting the process and allow for fair negotiations. Thank you to the postal workers who are still collecting letters for Santa and delivering, in some cases without pay, checks to the most vulnerable. Solidarity.
Order.
Uh-oh.
The Honourable Member for La Salle-et-Marne Verdun. Today, I am celebrating the 75th anniversary of the Club Richelieu of Verdun. Volunteers in this association in my riding work very hard to promote the French language and to improve the lives of people in our riding with a host of charitable activities. Their motto is peace and fraternity. The members of this association don't hold back. They hold fundraising activities that benefit young people and the underprivileged in our riding. These activities include the poker tournament, the silent auction, and the dinners that have been held many times over the years. Since 1949, the list of charities funded by the club is very long. These include the Harmonie de Verdun, the Ancre des Gens, the Camp Richelieu Saint-Côme, the Petit Renard, the Toujours Ensemble, and I also have to note the club's support for St. Vincent de Paul. And maybe you're not familiar with them, Mr. Speaker, but for the people of Verdun, they're very, very important. In the Southwest, we're a tightly woven community, and it's something to see. Long live Club Richelieu de Verdun.
The Honourable Member for Charleswood St. James, Assiniboia Headingley.
Common sense Conservatives have one simple request for this Prime Minister. Please just stop. Stop the tax hikes, especially the job-killing carbon tax. Stop fueling inflation by cutting inflationary spending and axing the sales tax on homes so home buyers can save up to $50,000. Stop adding debt by confirming that the...
Oh, I bet we're gonna hear a lot of that today. Please just stop. The Conservatives have found a new slogan.
To achieve so little. This Prime Minister has spent so much, he's added more debt than every other Prime Minister in Canadian history combined.
And the Monopoly guy is wearing a candy cane tie. That's pretty snazzy.
Driven up the cost of everything. Mr. Speaker, there's an old adage. Once you've dug yourself into a hole, it's time to stop digging. It's time for a carbon tax election so common sense Conservatives can axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime.
Hey. All right, if you guys are new here, make sure you hit that like button, hit that sub button. Sheer walking into the building like he owns the place.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We all know
Kevin,
when the
please sit down. Nobody wants to hear you.
They talk a
Fucking Ren and Stimpy looking ass.
Speaker. But when it comes right down to it, what do their actions on the floor of the House? Mr. Speaker, when it came a time to give a tax break to Canada's middle class, they voted no. Let me pose a question to you. How would you define hypocrisy, Mr. Speaker? When the Conservatives actually campaigned on giving a GST holiday in the last election, all of them, Mr. Speaker, including the leader of the Conservative Party, we bring forward a tax holiday on the GST, Mr. Speaker, and what do the Conservative Party do?
What?
They vote against a tax relief for the holiday season. Talk about the leader being a Grinch, Mr. Speaker. At the end of the day, you cannot trust the Conservatives. If you want a tax break, you vote for the Liberal.
Yell louder, Kevin. It's helping your point.
Oral questions.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Just before Christmas, snow is a-falling. Finally, the Minister will table her economic statement after this Prime Minister has doubled our national debt, adding more to our debt than all former Prime Ministers combined. He's doubled the cost of housing with bureaucracy that has been hampering building. He's doubled the number of people who have to go to a food bank with taxes on food. We're asking for one thing. Stop tax increases. Stop inflationary spending. Stop adding debt to Canadians.
No, Trudeau is not here. Believe it or not, he's getting photo ops in Halifax. I'm not even making that up. He's getting pictures done with some meeting in Halifax.
Record, and we'll present it on the 16th of December, so next week. We will talk about our record on the economy. Inflation is within targets put forward by the Bank of Canada. The Bank of Canada's key interest rate has gone down 4 times consecutively, and that is our economic record, and we're very proud of it. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. He's so proud of this statement that he wants to bury it in snow, Mr. Speaker. We want them to stop. Stop taxing people. We want them to eliminate GST on new home build, which would be one way of stopping inflationary taxes that have led to a costly life in Canada. We want promises to be kept. The Minister said that deficits would not go beyond $40 billion. Will she respect that promise, yes or no?
40 billion. Oh my God.
The Honourable Minister for Human Resources and Energy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We know that housing costs too much, and that is the reason for which we have eliminated sales tax for apartments. Canada is building at record rates. We have built more housing than when the Leader of the Opposition was the Minister for Housing, and we are seeing results. The cost of rent has gone down this year in big metropolitan areas like Montreal. The Conservative leader wants to bring back taxes on building. His plan will increase the cost of housing.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, after doubling the debt with inflationary spending, doubling the cost of housing with more bureaucracy that blocks building, doubling the number of people using food banks with carbon taxes on farmers and truckers who bring us our food. Finally, they're planning a fall update, but they'll do it in the snow on December 16th. Our message is stop. Yes. Stop the inflationary spending. Stop the tax increases on food and homes. Stop indebting Canadians. Will they please just stop?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, on the 16th of December, we will present our economic record in this chamber, and we will talk about the fall economic statement. And I anticipate that you're going to hear a lot about the economic record that we've amassed. One thing that I anticipate you'll hear about is what we've done with respect to childcare. On childcare, an economic affordability model, we've brought it down to $10 a day in 8 provinces. That has resulted in 110,000 women joining the workplace. What is that record, Mr. Speaker? 85% of women are now participating in the workforce in Canada. That is a record high. That is what we stand behind on this side of the House.
Shut up, Varani.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, what they've amassed is a lot of debt. In fact, they doubled the debt. This Prime Minister has added more debt than all prior Prime Ministers combined, which has caused the worst inflation in 40 years, inflation that is now rising as the debt is rising. Now, the Finance Minister said that she had a guardrail for the deficit. It would not go beyond $40 billion. If you go up to $40 billion, that means you've hit the guardrail. And if you go higher than $40 billion, you've gone through the guardrail. What's on the other side of a guardrail? A cliff. Yeah. Is this minister leading us off the cliff?
We're already off the cliff, Pierre.
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Let's talk about the spending that our government is doing. Let's talk about what observers are observing. Tiff Macklem, I'm pretty sure he knows who that is. The governor of the Bank of Canada says we're no longer trying to get inflation down.
What the hell was
Government
that?
spending is not pushing against getting inflation down. We have already brought it down. Let's talk about David Dodge, the former...
Ronnie's speaking so much bullshit his microphone couldn't handle it.
He said because it was obsessively focused on reducing the federal deficit over fiscal years 2011 to 2016, the Harper government unnecessarily contributed to a slower rather than a more muted recovery. We're not going to follow that playbook because it didn't work.
And ask colleagues to please not take the floor so that we can hear the answer to the question clearly. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, in the spirit of nonpartisanship, we have put forward a motion inspired by the leader of the NDP.
That's right.
He has said that this Prime Minister is weak, is greedy, is selfish, and is beholden to corporate interests.
Sounds like Jagmeet's talking about himself.
Has violated the rights of workers. So we took the NDP leader's words, we put it in a motion that includes non-confidence. Will the Speaker, will the Prime Minister allow this NDP leader a free vote so that he can vote non-confidence for Canadians?
Hey, let's get it going. Get the damn vote going. Karina, what do you have to say? I honestly don't want to hear her, but she's standing.
See, that is stretching the limits, of course, of question dealing with the administration of government, but I see that the Honourable Government House Leader is on her feet.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One thing we know, Mr. Speaker, is that the Leader of the Opposition certainly doesn't allow any free votes for his members of Parliament. And what we also know is that he doesn't allow them to speak for themselves. What we do know is that when they put forward, try to advocate for their communities, what does he say? No, don't do that, because I don't think it's politically expedient for me. So what he does do is muzzle his own MPs, doesn't allow them to have free vote, and keeps them from standing up for their communities. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Saint-Maxime School is in the news for prayers in class, homophobic comments, and students rejecting sex education in classes, among other things. The Quebec government has had enough of attacks upon secularism. It is asking Ottawa to put an end to religious exemptions in the criminal code and wants to tighten up Bill 21 on secularism. Ottawa's doing the opposite. It's challenging Bill 21. It's just beat around the bush about religious exemptions. When will this government stop undermining secularism in Quebec? The Honourable Minister for Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleague no doubt knows that education is a provincial matter. If he wants to talk about education and the way to protect children in the school system in Quebec, then he has to turn to Quebec City. This forum isn't quite where education is discussed. The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Quebec is a welcoming society that extends its arms to those who...
A welcoming society! Oh my God! Oh. Wow. What a fucking joke.
The right to love whoever we want. Canadian multiculturalism says the opposite. There's no need to integrate, no need to adhere to any values. Don't change a thing about yourselves. Does the federal government realise that its multiculturalism is harming the integration of new Quebecers and harming Quebec's ability to live together?
You don't even want to be here in Canada, so why don't you just go?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Unity is exactly what the Canadian Federation is encouraging, and that's why in Canada and in Quebec we are proud of being a united party that defends the rights and freedoms of everyone so that they can do what they believe is right for them. Once again, Mr. Speaker, education is a provincial matter, so we ask our colleague to turn to Quebec City instead of here about education.
The honourable member for Burnaby South.
Imagine this. A woman in her 70s, she's worked her whole life, raised her kids, done everything right. Now she's retired.
And now you've thrown her under the bus for your pension.
And she's got to skip meals. The Prime Minister believes that someone earning $140,000 a year deserves a check of $250, but that she doesn't. Why?
Here, here. Here, here. The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, we're going to stand by our record of defending seniors. On multiple occasions in this chamber over the last 9 years, we've done things like change the retirement age from 67, as proposed by the Harper Conservatives, back down to 65. We've made targeted investments to improve old age security for those over the age of 75. Most recently, we put in place a dental care plan for seniors that has had, despite assertions by the Conservatives that it doesn't even exist, 2
All right, Varani needs a new microphone.
million people actually receive services for the first time in decades. That's a record of serving seniors and assisting seniors and meeting them where they are. We'll stand by that record.
Maybe just mute him so we don't have to hear it ever again.
The honourable member for Burnaby South.
Mentioned that the minister didn't answer the question why they don't deserve checks of $250.
Imagine someone else living with disabilities, someone who can't make ends meet. The Prime Minister believes that this person doesn't need a helping hand. Will the Prime Minister finally see sense and include people with disabilities in their $250 check? The Honourable Minister for Justice. The measures that we have made on this side of the House targets poverty and targets helps people living with disabilities. We've added a benefit for them and them alone. What we want to do over the last few weeks is to make changes to GST that will help all Canadians. We'll always fight against poverty, and numbers show that we have managed to do so with a reduction in the poverty rates in Canada. Thank you.
The honourable member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Today, the NDP leader has a chance to prove that he didn't sell out Canadian workers for his own pension. Now, he famously promised Canadians that he ripped up his coalition with the Liberals, saying they, quote, were too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people. Now, Conservatives agree, and Canadians want a carbon tax election. So, will the Prime Minister allow the NDP leader to vote for his own words, or did the PM whip the NDP vote to block a carbon tax election?
I'm afraid that question doesn't, again, meet the relevance of the administration of government. I do see the government House leader rising to answer. Colleagues, couple of things. One, let's just make sure that when someone has the floor, that no one else is taking the floor. And B, colleagues, I would hate for us to repeat what had gone on Friday. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As you mentioned, there was actually no question for the government there, but if the member opposite wants to talk about pensions, he could talk about the pension of the leader of the opposition, who, because he's been here for 2 decades, is estimated at being about $2 million, Mr. Speaker. And if he wants to talk about muzzling of members of parliament, he should probably pose the question to the leader of his own party, who doesn't like MPs that don't ask the questions that he wants them to ask. In fact, we see all of them around the outskirts of the Conservative area in this House of Commons. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Well, it looks like this Prime Minister has lost control of everything except his control over the NDP. Now, according to the NDP leader's own words, quote, "You're never going to count on us if you're going to take away the rights of the workers. Never." Now, we've seen that this Prime Minister has done just that, ordering binding arbitration. But the question is, what has this Prime Minister promised to the NDP in exchange for their support for his failing government and his failed carbon tax?
Again, that is not relevant to the administration of government or about and the chair will have something to say about this at the end of question period. But I do see that the honourable minister was rising on his feet. I don't know if he wants to continue to respond. I see no minister rising. The honourable member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Mr. Speaker, every time that there's a ruling about the government on this issue, there's an absolutely material question, which is the Liberal or the NDP say one thing over and over again, and then come in and support the Liberals. So asking what the Liberals have promised the NDP in favor of their support after time and time again saying all of these things, they keep supporting the government. So what has the government promised the NDP to avoid a carbon tax election?
Oh, and Greg mutes the microphone. The first mute of many, ladies and gentlemen. I guess we will see what happens in the upcoming moments here. Greg with the classic mute.
I'm going to be offering a ruling at the end of question period.
And the feed has died.
Perhaps I wish I could have done it earlier. But
lovely.
But the member opposite, and in fact most of the Conservative caucus, know a thing or two about saying one thing and doing the opposite. They've been talking about cutting taxes, but at the first opportunity to cut taxes for Canadians, they say no, Mr. Speaker. They talk about, standing up on behalf of their constituents, but when they try to do that, the Leader of the Opposition takes away their ability to pose questions in this place. Mr. Speaker, if they don't repeat the slogans ad nauseum of the Leader of the Opposition, they're simply not allowed to speak. They're pretty good at saying one thing and doing another. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
That sounds like your government. Saying one thing, doing another.
To be very clear, Speaker, the Leader of the NDP has gotten up and railed against the Liberals for the GST measures, against workers, every possible thing. The NDP has said the government is incompetent. They said they can't vote for him. Yet every time there's a confidence motion, the NDP stand up and do what? They vote for the government. So it is the business of this place. How much is it costing Canadians? What has this administration promised the NDP to get them to vote against their leader's own words?
Now we're cooking.
Once again, the Honourable Government House Leader is rising to her feet.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think the honourable member knows something about railing against a leader, but one question that she might want to ask the leader of her party is why he won't get a security clearance. I believe last week at committee we heard from another
deflecting to the security clearance. Come on, Karina, that's
alleged
lame.
interference by India in the Conservative leadership race, but the Leader of the Opposition refuses to get a security clearance to actually learn about what happened. Mr. Speaker, he should put the security interests of Canadians ahead of his own personal interests. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, on the 4th of September, all Canadians witnessed the Leader of the NDP ripping up the agreement with this Liberal
that was
government.
aggressive.
He was
ripping up.
Convincing at the time. He said the Liberals are too weak, too selfish and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for the people. That was on the 4th of September. But today, the 9th of December, will the Leader of the NDP allow his members to vote for themselves against him? And if they vote following the party line, how much will this cost to Canadians? Once again, I would like to encourage all members to refrain from speaking when they're not recognized in the House of Commons. Once again,
please.
We are in a situation where the speakership is not in the most enviable position, because the question doesn't have to do with government, the government and its operations, but the Honourable Minister is rising. Well, the question is not relevant, Mr. Speaker, but one relevant question is why this honourable member can't speak for himself and speak for his constituents. His Conservative leader claims that affordable housing that are built in his riding and in other Conservative ridings simply don't exist. That's a bit odd. He says that housing projects don't exist, where there are hundreds of affordable housing units that are currently being built and that are built in Conservative ridings. Once again, before the honourable member stands to take the floor, I would like everyone to refrain from speaking unless recognised by the speakership. The honourable member. Well, my question was very simple. How much will it cost Canadians? The minister doesn't know how to count, but the minister loves to spend. So the problem is, the NDP added
that was a good little
another layer
roast.
to this. The leader of the NDP said that the Liberal government will always give in to corporate greed and will always intervene to ensure that unions have no power. That's our motion word for word, Mr. Speaker. So what does the Prime Minister think of a leader who might vote against him? This Prime Minister, who has never respected his word for deficits when he announced to Canadians that there would be a budgetary balance.
No, it'll balance itself.
The
Don't worry.
Honourable Minister for Public Services and Procurement. I know how to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, Mr. Speaker. That's the number of affordable housing units that were built under the Conservative leader when he was Minister for Housing. 8,000 are being built right now just in Quebec, thanks to the $2 billion.
Well, at least we know Dracula can count to 6.
And hundreds of these housing units will be in Conservative.
Bloody Count Chocula over here.
That we have built throughout the country over the last few years. The honourable member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte. Mr. Speaker, yet another fiasco for the CBSA, with the failures of the CBSA Assessment and Revenue Management application, or CARM. 22 breakdowns in 1 month for an application that took 14 years to develop and that cost taxpayers $556 million. $500 million with just a 50% cost overrun, not to mention the fact that the agency hid important documents from parliamentarians. Today, the Committee for Trade voted unanimously to ask the Auditor General to investigate this latest Liberal fiasco. Will the government support our request for an inquiry? The Honourable Minister for Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, my colleague knows full well that the government does not give instructions to the Auditor General, and we respect the free will of committees to study what they want and to invite people, such as the Auditor General, to study important files for Canadians. We believe that the CARM system replaced one that was old. It was 36 years old. And we understand the private sector's concerns, and I have full trust that we will rectify this very rapidly. The honourable member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte. There's a real cost to the agency's fiasco with the CARM. There's one for taxpayers, $556 million, but there's also one for entrepreneurs. Their imports are paralysed at the border. They're suffering billing errors, they're being double paid for direct debits, and there are in-terminal delays for them. They have absolutely no customer service when the CARM crashes. And it takes weeks for the agency to correct its mistakes. What is the government doing today to stop making businesses pay for its fiasco? The Honourable Minister for Public Safety. Once again, Mr. Speaker, we, of course, share the concerns of our colleague. We will support Canadian businesses to make sure that they pay the right amount in an efficient way. That was the objective of modernizing this technology. That started in 2010. So it's not just one government, it's two governments that decided to improve a system to make it easier to access, but also make customs easier to navigate. We will correct the errors. The Honourable Member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte. The CALM application fiasco is not a first for the CBSA. The agency was also behind ArriveCan. Let's not forget the application that was supposed to cost $80,000, but that ended up costing $60 million. Clearly, there's a fundamental problem at the agency when it comes to transparency, monitoring of spending, and cost overruns. The Bloc Québécois and the Trade Committee have asked the Auditor General to investigate. The government cannot afford to wait for another fiasco before taking action. Will it put the agency...
Yes, Fred Gungus.
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, we have discussed here in the House a number of times about how important the work of the CBSA is, be it protecting our country, be it dealing with immigration cases, be it stopping the entrance of drugs like fentanyl. So the CBSA every single day does excellent work for our country. We fully trust their work. We will invest even more to support their important work, and that is exactly what we will do.
The Honourable Member for Barrie-Innisfil.
The NDP leader continues to hold the country hostage, playing political hokey-pokey to secure his pension by February.
Political hokey-pokey.
Agreement with the Liberals. Then he took himself out, ripping up the agreement while shaking his fist all about. Now he's put himself back in, taping the agreement together, turning himself around after saying he would vote no confidence. So what deal did the Prime Minister make with the leader of the NDP to secure his vote of confidence, and how much will it cost Canadians?
December 16th. Confidence is directly related to administration. What's it going to cost us?
There you go, the second mute of the day. I had a feeling it was going to come. I don't know if you guys saw that, but Pierre got up and started dancing. That was kind of funny. I'll actually just go back briefly.
Find out December 16th.
Of government.
So anyway, there you go.
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the Conservative members of Parliament, all they can do is say one thing and do another. They're pretending to support workers' rights when in reality it's the Leader of the Opposition who brought forward some of the most draconian anti-worker legislation in this country's history. Mr. Speaker, we're going to continue to stand up for workers right across this country. It's a record we are proud of. It's not something the Conservatives can say that they have ever done. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Barrie-Innisfil.
Words matter. The leader of the NDP said he ripped up his supply and confidence agreement with the Liberals, saying the Liberals are too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people. Speaking to poor workers before the Liberals violated their right to strike, he said, if there's any vote in Parliament that in any way impacts your rights, I can tell you right now, we'll vote no, whether that vote is a confidence vote or not. So what
Let's
did
get the
Prime
vote
Minister,
going.
What deal did he make with the leader of the NDP to secure his vote of confidence, and how much will it cost Canadians?
Sell out Jagmeet.
The Honourable
Sell out
Minister for
Singh.
Labour and for seniors.
Mr. Speaker, Bill C-377 and Bill C-525 will go down in history as some of the most oppressively anti-labor legislation ever passed in this Parliament. One of the very first acts of this government was to repeal both of those pieces of legislation. The author of those pieces of legislation was none other than the leader of the opposition, its chief architect, its chief salesman. He's the most anti-worker leader ever elected to this House of Commons.
Alors, s'il vous plaît.
Order, please. The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, the leader of the NDP said that he ripped up the agreement with the Liberals last fall. The leader of the NDP said that the Liberals are too weak, too selfish and too beholden to corporate interests. The NDP leader also said that the Liberal government will always give in to corporate greed at the expense of workers. So, Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister allow the leader of the NDP to vote for the latter's own words, or will the Liberal government push the NDP caucus to vote against the leader of the NDP leader? This time I'm not particularly convinced that this is a pertinent question to government operations, but the Honourable Minister for Labour and Seniors is rising. Mr. Speaker, in the previous Parliament, Bills C-377 and C-529 were some of the most anti-union bills in Western history. The main spokesperson and the main architect of these bills was none other than the current leader of the opposition. So, he is the most anti-union leader in the history of Canada. I ask him to ask the Honourable Member to ask his leader about his leader's opinion.
For Winnipeg Centre.
Mr. Speaker, Women's Shelters Canada says that the housing shortage is trapping people in abusive circumstances, especially in cities where the rent is skyrocketing. In Saskatchewan, victims are fleeing to rural areas with cheaper rents, but with fewer social supports and public resources. And shelters in the Greater Toronto area are overwhelmed because rents are out of reach.
So vote Trudeau out in a non-confidence vote, you NDP loser. Instead of colliding with him again. This coalition needs to end.
Housing to save lives.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and
The
Communities.
colleague is right, Mr. Speaker. We do need more affordable housing.
It's unreal. She sits there and cries about all these issues that the very government she's partnering with has created. Stop fucking backing them, you idiot.
By pointing to vulnerable women, I sympathize in my own community and communities across the country. It remains not just a challenge but a crisis, and that's why the housing strategy that I mentioned just now has placed a focus on ensuring women are housed who have experienced domestic violence. Why the Rapid Housing Initiative is doing the same thing. We have more to do, and we will do that work in partnership with any interested party. I know the Conservatives won't be there, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Nanaimo Ladysmith.
Mr. Speaker, families in Nanaimo Ladysmith are trying to get by, but times are tough with more and more people.
Yeah, so times are tough. Once again, the non-confidence vote, Lisa.
Beyond, but they require funding to expand and meet the growing need. Despite ample
The NDP is the party of bitching and complaining and getting absolutely nothing done while helping create all the issues that they bitch and complain about.
funding required so people on Vancouver Island are not left to go hungry.
The Honourable Minister for Families, Youth and Social Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I often take the opportunity to meet with volunteers at food banks in my community here in Ottawa and across the country. And what I hear consistently, Mr. Speaker, is what a difference the Canada Child Benefit has made for families that are relying on a food bank for service. The Canada Child Benefit provides monthly support for families up to $7,800 a year per child. This is timely support, which we know the Conservatives would oppose.
The Honourable Member for Scarborough Agincourt.
Mr. Speaker, the government is introducing a 2-month tax break for all Canadians. After all their talk about cutting taxes, you would expect the Conservatives to walk the walk and support this measure, but they voted against it. Can the Minister of Small Business speak more about what the government is doing to make life better and safer for Canadians and businesses?
Good question.
Yes.
Good question.
The Honourable Minister for Small Business.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives are all talk and no action.
Starting December 14, Canadians will get a GST holiday. The Conservatives talk about axing the tax, but they voted against removing the GST off groceries and family essentials. They say they'll build the homes, but vow to cut the housing.
This is how stupid the Liberals are. They ask their own party questions, and then they blame the Conservatives.
Our gun control measures. As you can see, Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives are the ones that are putting a stop to the measures that are helping Canadians and small businesses.
Order, please. The honourable member from Calgary Forest Lawn.
This Liberal NDP government created a fall fiscal fiasco as they failed to table their fall economic statement. After 9 years of inflationary deficits, adding more debt than every government before them combined, they have a lot to hide. Even the parliamentary budgeting officer said this feudal finance minister blew through her own fiscal guardrail of her $40 billion deficit. Why don't they just stop the economic arson, stop the tax hikes, stop the inflationary deficits, stop adding to the debt, and call a carbon tax election now?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we know that the only thing the Conservatives are serving up for Christmas dinner are stale slogans. They've been trying to change the channel. The Bank of Canada Governor said at a Senate committee recently, government spending is not pushing up or pushing against us getting inflation down. The Parliamentary Budget Officer also recently said the current fiscal policy in Canada is sustainable. He also said we could spend up to 1.5% more of GDP. What's appalling is to understand how the Conservative Party of Canada won't step up to support a tax break with all their obsession about tax cuts.
The honourable member for Calgary Forest Lawn.
While the Liberals brag about turning temporary 2-month tax tricks like taking dimes off Doritos, common sense Conservatives will axe the tax for good because their carbon tax scam is driving more than 2 million Canadians into a food bank in a single month and 1 in 4 to skip meals. If they're so sure about quadrupling their carbon tax scam, why don't they just stop? Stop breaking the country further. Call a carbon tax election now so Canadians can choose between more tax tricks or a common sense Conservative government that will bring home lower prices and powerful paychecks.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives want to talk about tax tricks. What I think is interesting is tricking Canadians into thinking that they're actually serious about cutting taxes for Canadians when the first opportunity they get to stand up in this House and support Canadians who they know well have been struggling through an inflationary period. And they won't. They stand up against, they oppose the very tax cuts that they campaigned on. A GST holiday for Canadians on essentials over the next 2 months is a good thing. I don't know how they can deny the support that Canadians deserve.
The honourable member for Simcoe North.
Mr. Speaker, last year the Finance Minister said that the deficit would be less than $40.1 billion. And now Parliament's still waiting for the public accounts to confirm whether the minister kept that promise. Can the minister spare us the suspense and tell us what the deficit was for last year?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, our government has stuck to our fiscal guardrails, and that's exactly why inflation has come down for 11 months in a row, has been within the Bank of Canada's target range for 11 months in a row. We were the first in the G7 to cut interest rates, and we've had 4 consecutive rate cuts. And we're looking forward to this Wednesday with the Bank of Canada. We'll have another meeting and looking forward to their announcement. Thank you.
That's right.
Colleagues, especially the honourable member from Abbotsford, please do not speak unless recognized by the Speaker. The honourable member from Simcoe North.
Mr. Speaker, what is the point of making promises that you don't intend to try or even keep? In 2020, the Finance Minister said that when the need for stimulus was over, it would be withdrawn. They didn't withdraw it. Then it was that the debt to GDP ratio would continue going down, except 1 year later, it went up. And then she said the deficit would be less than $40.1 billion. And lo and behold, we find out she's broke that promise too. So when will someone at least admit that these folks are committing economic vandalism and tell us what the deficit is, or are they just worried that it's going to shred all the credibility that she has left?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation.
Our government will stack up and compare our record to the Conservatives and run on that any day of the week and twice on Sundays.
Order. I'm going to ask the honourable members to please not take and have conversations.
The Liberal government has about as much credibility as the mainstream media, which is about none right now, so let's see them out.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary from the top, please.
From the top. Our government will stack up and run our record, our fiscal and economic record against the Conservatives any day
Just
of the week
getting
and twice
cooked.
on Sunday. And I'm happy.
Greg's mad.
Colleagues,
Emperor
the more time that the
Fergus
Speaker has to spend on his
Darth
feet, the fewer
Fungus
questions we have to get through in
is
question
mad.
period. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our government will run on our record on economic policy against the Conservatives any day of the week and twice on Sundays. We have a AAA credit rating, the lowest deficit, the lowest net debt to GDP ratio. We have seen that the Stats Canada has revised the forecast for Canada for the last 3 years up, which is significant. And we're also rated by the IMF to have the strongest GDP growth in the G7. I think that economic record stands for itself, Mr. Speaker.
Order, please. L'honorable député de Lac.
The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, ever since in 2023 the Safe Third Country Agreement was renegotiated, the Bloc Québécois has been sounding the alarm because there's a loophole that enables people who cross the border illegally to claim asylum after hiding for 14 days. And a CBSA report obtained by the media on Friday confirms that 1,900 people used that loophole and claimed asylum. That's just between April and September 2023. According to the CBSA, the real numbers are almost certainly higher. Will the government finally take action and do something about this 14-day loophole? The Honourable Minister of Immigration, Citizenship and Refugees. Well, if I understand correctly, Mr. Speaker, my colleague wants me to take action instantly here on the floor of the House of Commons without even letting the U.S. know. Of course, we care about safety and security at the border. We will continue to take action to guarantee that. I hope the Bloc Québécois will support our reform to the asylum system, which we'll be bringing forward soon, because last time, despite the fact that we were supported by the government of Quebec, they said no. It's really inconsistent, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member. Well, it's his job to answer questions. This is question period, Mr. Speaker. Anyway, this government has known for more than a year that this 14-day loophole is being exploited. It has known that for more than a year, thousands of people are illegally crossing the border to claim asylum, and it's known that that entire time, human traffickers have been abusing vulnerable people to the tune of $45,000. And yet the government has done nothing. It's inexcusable. It's inhumane, Mr. Speaker. Why have we had to wait until Donald Trump started making threats before this government would finally do something about illegal immigration and organized crime? It's known about this for more than a year, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Minister of Immigration. Looking at recent history with bringing the visa back on Mexico, Mr. Speaker, the Bloc Québécois was pleased with this, and we've been tightening things in the immigration system for over a year, and it's working. In November, the number of interceptions at the border was at the lowest level, and we will continue to secure our border.
The Honourable Member for Calgary, Rocky Ridge.
Mr. Speaker, the Finance Minister's failure to table a timely fall economic statement goes to the core incompetency of this government. Canadians need a government to axe the carbon tax, build more homes by exempting the GST from new home construction, and fix the budget by getting spending under control. And Canadians are tired of waiting. Can the Finance Minister confirm if she will keep her promise that the deficit will not exceed her $40 billion fiscal guardrail? Yes or no, please?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, it is great to learn today that our government will announce the fall economic statement. It will be tabled on December 16th, which is good news. And, you know, what's interesting is when the Conservatives say fix the budget, what they really mean to say, like Canadians should hear that as translated, means cut programs and services that Canadians rely on. Whether it's dental care, pharmacare, early childhood and education, any of the signature programs that have supported Canadians through this inflationary crisis, they're going to cut all of them.
Honourable Member for Calgary Rocky Ridge.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's nearly Christmas and we're still waiting for the fall economic statement and for the public accounts, both of which should have been tabled in October. That's just basic management. Canadians need to know how much debt this government's piling on, and if this government can't even manage the basics, like giving Canadians the straight facts about the public's finances, will they call an immediate election so that Canadians can elect a government that will?
Hear, hear, hear. Hear, hear.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation.
I've been here for 5 years, thank God, for the people of Whitby. I have never seen the level of obstruction in this House that I've seen over the last 40-something days, where the Conservatives have continued to filibuster and block every aspect of parliamentary functioning and work, and they're standing up complaining that the fall economic statement is just a bit too late for them. Well, you have done it to yourselves.
If they're blocking Parliament and blocking work, then how come your tax break bill passed? It's kind of interesting, isn't it?
Through the chair. Alors, s'il vous plaît. Order.
It's all your fault, Greg.
Oh, listen to Greg. He's a little chucklehead right now.
Then I have the
The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-Lévis. We need to stop these tax hikes and the skyrocketing debt and inflation, but that doesn't seem to matter to the Liberal bloc. But it's extremely important to the common sense Conservatives. We need to leave money in the pockets of Quebecers. That's our vision. We are wondering why the Bloc Québécois voted twice against our non-confidence motions and propped up this bad government that is hurting people every day. When will we have elections so that Quebecers can finally do something to choose a Conservative government and keep money in their pockets? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our colleague talked about common sense. Well, what is total nonsense is that in her own writing, there are 100 affordable housing units that are currently
Pretty uncanny, to be honest with you.
being built on Léo Couture Boulevard. They are currently being built by the Lévis Municipal Housing Bureau, and Minister Drainville from the government of Quebec and other stakeholders, and they're very proud of what they're accomplishing, and yet she lets the Conservative leader pretend that these housing units don't exist, and he also seems to want to stop construction of them.
For Fawn Woodbridge.
Mr. Speaker, the government has introduced a GST tax break during the holiday season that will help Canadians keep more money in their pockets, especially families with young children who need it most. Meanwhile, the Conservative leader and his party voted against this holiday tax break, all while they keep preaching to be in favor of tax cuts and helping Canadians. Can the Minister of Diversity and Inclusion please tell us what this federal government is doing to support hardworking Canadians during the Christmas season? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister for Diversity and Inclusion.
Mr. Speaker, it is indeed ironic that the Conservative leader, who loves to talk about cutting taxes, was quick to vote against the very tax cut that would put real money back in the pockets of Canadians. Mr. Speaker, we have already cut taxes for middle class and small businesses, and now with this GST cut, we're giving even more support for families. It's too bad, Mr. Speaker, that the Conservatives are only allowed to serve the needs of their leader rather than their own constituents. Our government will continue to focus on what matters, and that is delivering for Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. Mr. Speaker, everyone knows that over the last 9 years, this Liberal government has plunged Canadians into debt. And on 2 occasions, unfortunately, the Bloc Québécois has propped this government up. Quebecers deserve much better. Once again, This minority government has lost control of public funds since, once again, it will be tabling the fall economic statement not long before the holidays. Is this the Christmas present that we're going to be getting? An extra deficit from this wasteful government?
Ah, the Chihuahua has stood up, ladies and gentlemen. Prepare your ears.
I would just invite all members to not take the floor unless they've been recognized by the chair. The Honourable Minister of Innovation. Mr. Speaker,
Oh, you're speaking French. Okay, we're good.
I know that the holidays are coming up, and the Conservatives love hearing children's stories and slogans, but even the member for Port-Neuf-Jacques-Cartier, a person I respect, but he knows perfectly well that we've made record investments. In 2023, Canada was the third country on the list of the countries that received the most investment, and we are investing in Canadians, in industry and Canadian workers. Mr. Speaker, we should be celebrating the investment that is being made in Canada.
The honourable member for Edmonton Mill Woods.
Harshandeep Singh, just 20 years old when he came to Canada to build a better life. He got a job like many other students as a security guard in Edmonton. Just 3 days after starting this job, he was murdered on the job. Our heartfelt condolences go out to his family and friends at this very difficult time. But Mr. Speaker, his killer was a violent criminal with past police interactions and a potentially long criminal history. This government changed the laws to make it easier for repeat violent offenders to roam free in our communities. When will they take the safety of our communities?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, I, like every member of Parliament, is very troubled by that story about that young man losing his life so cavalierly. And our condolences go to his family and to his entire community. What I would say with respect to keeping Canadians safe, what we're doing is working on multiple fronts. Part of that deals with gun control, and that's assault weapons and handguns. Another part of it is the bail reform, which we implemented at the behest of the provinces. And if there's more that needs to be under the criminal code, we are open to that. What we're also keen on is seeing in the province of Alberta and in other provinces investments being made in courtroom spaces, in police officers, in JPs, and in Crown attorneys, so we can all do the work we need to keep Canadians safe.
The honourable member for Edmonton Mill Woods.
Mr. Speaker, violent gun crime has gone up over 100% since they have been in power. And in 1 year, 256 Canadians have been murdered by somebody that was out on bail or out on some type of condition. Harshandeep Singh's murder and many others cannot be accepted as just an unfortunate, unavoidable incident. It is a serious systemic failure when our government allows violent criminals with a long criminal record to go freely in our communities. When will the NDP Liberals stop this madness and prioritize the safety of Canadians? Because if they won't do it, we're ready.
Great job.
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, the safety of Canadians is all of our responsibility. The tool that we have in this chamber is the Criminal Code of Canada. The tool that the provinces have is implementing the administration of criminal justice in their localities. What does that mean? That means hiring police officers. It means hiring crowns to argue about bail cases. It means ensuring JPs have the training to apply the law, and it means ensuring that there are detention facilities to house people who are being denied bail. These are critical facets that need to be invested in. We're doing the work we need to on the criminal code, and we'll continue to do so. What we expect is cooperation from the provinces.
The honourable member from Steveston, Richmond East.
Mr. Speaker, countries and businesses around the world are heavily investing in artificial intelligence. The benefits of this cutting-edge technology are already growing, finding efficiencies and spurring innovation. It's imperative that we secure the Canadian advantage. Can the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry update this House on how he's making sure that Canada leads the global shift to AI, and that our workers, like the many AI companies in my hometown of Richmond, are the ones benefiting from the jobs and growth that come along with it?
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Speaker, I'd like to thank the member for a great question, Mr. Speaker, because AI is in fact the defining technology of our time, Mr. Speaker. It's going to have an impact on every industry and every sector.
This is the guy in charge of AI. Well, not in charge of it, but in charge of the development and investment of it.
In Canada to build essential infrastructure in our country and to make sure that small and medium-sized businesses could access compute capacity. Mr. Speaker, we're going to work on this side of the House to make sure that we continue to be leader in AI, in responsible AI, attracting investment, attracting talent. Let's celebrate Canada, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. Mr. Speaker, with the help of the Liberals, private investors have bought Norgate Apartments in Montreal. That's the biggest housing purchase in Quebec in 2024. And yet there is a housing crisis happening. People are very concerned about the fact that the Liberal government has let them fall through the cracks. Montrealers can barely afford rents as it stands. Instead of helping private investors get rich, the government could have helped build more affordable apartments. Why place the interests of private investors ahead of those of Montrealers? The Honourable Minister of Tourism. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for his question. It gives me an opportunity to tell him, if he doesn't know already, that we have just made an announcement, in fact in my writing, to bring 720 units outside market pricing. That's 720 new affordable units, because we don't just want to build new affordable housing. We want to make it sustainable and ongoing.
The Honourable Member for Kitchener Centre.
Mr. Speaker, the Canada Council for the Arts has not only had its funding cut in recent years, but significant inequities remain, leaving communities like mine dramatically underfunded. Today, MPs from 4 parties in this House have co-signed a letter, again bringing this to the attention of the Minister and calling for action. Will the Minister of Heritage commit to working with all interested MPs to restore federal arts funding and ensure all communities get their fair share?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for Canadian Heritage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Whether it's funding for the Fringe Festival in Vancouver or the Mermaid Theatre in King Hence, our government will always be there to support the arts. And I want to assure that member that I will work with him, we will work with him, and any members that are interested in ensuring long-term sustainable funding for the cultural sector in this country. This afternoon, I'll be meeting with the CEO of the Canada Council for the Arts. We'll take this conversation up as well. But, Mr. Speaker, unlike Conservatives who believe that arts are only an elite topic, our party and at this side of the House, we believe that arts are the soul of a nation, and we will be there to support artists and the culture sector at every turn.
Colleagues, it's indeed my honour for me to draw your attention of members to the presence of the gallery.
Colleagues, please.
Of Ms. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, a joint recipient of the 2001 Nobel Peace Prize.
All right, we got a Nobel Peace Prize winner in the audience today. But you know what is really cool? The audience watching the stream right now, thank every single one of you for watching. Hit that like button, hit that sub button. If you are new, the non-confidence vote should be coming up very soon. Very soon. Because if it doesn't, I'm going to lose my mind. Greg has muted the... Oh, no, he hasn't.
16, the House will now proceed to the taking of the deferred recorded division on the motion of Mr. Poilievre relating to the business of supply.
Here we go.
Call on the members.
Guys, here we go. It's about to happen. The third non-confidence vote is about to happen. We have 15 minutes to kill. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this one, to be honest with you. I have a feeling it's not going to pass. I don't really have that much hope or excitement. But my God, guys, if this passes, I'm probably gonna lose my mind. This is gonna be fantastic if it passes. But I doubt it. I doubt it. Stay humble. Stay humble, everybody. We don't know yet. That was a fast 15 minutes, I guess.
No. There's no point of order at this point. Before the House proceeds to the taking of this deferred recorded division, colleagues, before the House proceeds to taking this deferred recorded division, I wish to remind honourable members of the following passage from House of Commons Procedure and Practice, 3rd edition, at page 587, under the heading, Decorum during the taking of a vote. Quote, from the time the Speaker begins to put the question until the results of the vote are announced, members are not to enter, leave, or cross the House, nor may they make any noise or disturbance. End quote. Je suis convaincu que les honorables...
I'm convinced that honourable members will comply to this indication to make sure that our operations can happen in an ordinate way. The question is as follows. Mr. Poilievre, seconded by Mr. Muse, moved that 1. Whereas the leader of the New Democratic Party said he ripped up his supply and confidence agreement with the Liberal government. 2. Whereas the NDP leader said the Liberals are too weak, too selfish and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people.
3. Whereas the NDP leader said that the Liberal government will always cave to corporate greed and always step in to make sure the unions have no power, in response to the Liberal Labour Minister's referrals to the Canadian Industrial Relations Board that ordered the workers of Teamsters Canada Rail...
Jagmeet's gonna sell out again. I'm totally ready for it.
...to resume their duties, violating their right to strike. Mais puis-je dispenser? Therefore, the House agrees with the NDP leader, and the House proclaims that it has lost confidence in the Prime Minister and the government. La période...
The 10-minute voting period for members voting electronically has started, and the House will now proceed to the vote for members participating in person. All those in favour of the motion will please rise.
All right. All right.
Monsieur Deltel.
Monsieur Deltel.
Mrs. Stubb.
Oh, guys.
Monsieur Paulus.
Monsieur Paulus.
Mr. Scheer.
Mr. Scheer.
Mr. Upal.
Mr. Upal.
Miss Landsman.
Miss Landsman.
Mr. Hallan.
Mr. Hallan.
Miss Lewis Haldeman Norfolk.
Miss Lewis Haldeman Norfolk.
Mr. Barrett.
Mr. Barrett.
Mrs. Gray.
Mrs. Gray.
Mr. Barlow.
Mr. Barlow.
Miss Dancho.
Miss Dancho.
Mr. Ellis.
Mr. Ellis.
Mr. Kelly.
Mr. Kelly.
Oh no, the entire block are sitting. Oh no. Yeah, it's not passing. It's not gonna pass. It's not gonna happen. The block sold out. The block sold out. And the NDP, I mean, everybody knew that was gonna happen. Everybody knew that was gonna happen. But, oh, wait, maybe. No, those are still conservative members, aren't they? Yeah. Oh, I don't know, guys. I don't think it's gonna happen. This is gonna be a third major disappointment. I was about to say massive or major. It came out as one. Oh, man. Yep. It goes by party? Oh, I thought it went by row. Oh, okay. I still don't have any confidence in the block. If the block stands up, then it could be close, but there's also independent we have to worry about. There's also...
Miss Rude.
Mr. Généreux.
Monsieur Généreux.
There's also the Green Party, which I know is like 1 seat or 2 seats, but still, they're still gonna vote.
Monsieur Martel.
Monsieur Gould.
Monsieur Gould.
Mr. Caputo.
Mr. Caputo.
Mr. Epp.
Mr. Epp.
Miss Rempel Garner.
Miss Rempel Garner.
Mr. Zimmer.
Mr. Zimmer.
Mr. Majumdar.
Mr. Majumdar.
Mr. Cram.
Mr. Cram.
Mr. Tolmie.
Mr. Tolmie.
Mrs. Wagenthal.
Mrs. Wagenthal.
Mr. Albus.
Mr. Albus.
Can May even stand? I don't know. Gotta see how many she's had.
Battlefords Lloydminster.
Mrs. Salt Battleford Lloydminster.
Mr. McLean.
Mr. McLean.
Mr. Weber.
Mr. Weber.
Mr. McGuire.
Mr. McGuire.
Mr. Reed.
Mr. Reed.
Mr. Shields.
Mr. Shields.
Mr. Falk Provencher.
Mr. Falk Provencher.
Mr. Motts.
Mr. Motts.
Mr. Williamson.
Mr. Williamson.
Mr. Arnold.
Mr. Arnold.
Mr. D'Entremont.
Mr. D'Entremont.
Mr. Morrison.
Mr. Morrison.
Mr. Soroka.
Mr. Soroka.
Mrs. Vecchio.
Mrs. Vecchio.
Mr. Carey.
Mr. Carey.
Mr. Vidal.
Mr. Vidal.
Mr. Dowdle.
Mr. Dowdle.
If you are just joining right now, this is the non-confidence vote underway. This is what everybody has been waiting for. This is the third non-confidence vote to happen.
Monsieur Terrien.
Madame Larouche.
Madame Larouche.
Madame Chabot.
Oh!
Chabot.
Oh, the block seems to be a bit divided here. Or is that partially? No, that's the block. Okay. All right. We'll have to see in the electronic voting period 1 for 1 who has voted completely. Oh, there's a little bit of freaking out, guys.
Can I ask the honourable member, please, from Miramichi Grand Lake to please not take the floor? Did we get everybody?
All those opposed to the motion will please rise.
Mr. Blair.
Mr. Blair.
Mr. Holland.
Mr. Holland.
Miss Ing.
Ms. Ing.
Mr. McKinnon-Gatineau.
Mr. McKinnon-Gatineau.
Miss Anand.
Ms. Anand.
Miss Tassi.
Ms. Tassi.
Mr. Varani.
Mr. Varani.
Miss Sachs.
Ms. Sachs.
Miss Murray.
Ms. Murray.
Miss Groh.
Miss Grove.
Mr. Casey.
Mr. Casey.
Mr. Vandal.
Mr. Vandal.
Miss Haidu.
Miss Haidu.
Mr. Miller.
Mr. Miller.
Miss Sahota.
Miss Sahota.
Madame Le Boutillier.
Madame Le Poutier.
Madame Bibot.
Madame Bibot.
Mrs. Valdez.
Mrs. Valdez.
Miss Jazak.
Miss Jazek.
Monsieur Dubourg.
Monsieur Dubourg.
Madame Lalonde.
Madame Lalonde.
Mr. Sheehan.
Mr. Sheehan.
Miss Jones.
Miss Jones.
Miss O'Connell.
Miss O'Connell.
Mr. Oliphant.
Mr. Oliphant.
Mr. Gerritsen.
Mr. Gerritsen.
Mr. Lamoureux.
Mr. Lamoureux.
Madame Fortier.
Madame Fortier.
Mr. Fragiscados.
Mr. Fagascados.
Monsieur Lauzon.
Monsieur Lauzon.
Mr. May Cambridge.
Mr. May Cambridge.
Monsieur El Khoury.
Monsieur El Khoury.
Mr. Fonseca.
Mr. Fonseca.
Mr. Hardy.
Mr. Hardy.
Mr. Yacono.
Mr. Yacono.
Mr. Johari.
Mr. Johari.
Mr. Lightbound.
Mr. Lightbound.
Mr. Nagvi.
Mr. Nakvi.
Mr. Badaway.
Mr. Badaway.
Mrs. Atwin.
Mrs. Atwin.
Mr. Sarai.
Mr. Sarai.
Ms. Vandenbelt.
Ms. Vandenbelt.
Mr. Sanson.
Monsieur Sanson.
Monsieur Serry.
Monsieur Serry.
Mr. Long.
Mr. Long.
Mr. McDonald Avalon.
Mr. McDonald Avalon.
Mr. McKinnon Coquitlam Port Coquitlam.
Mr. McKinnon Coquitlam Port Coquitlam.
Mr. McLeod.
Mr. McLeod.
Mr. Morrissey.
Mr. Morrissey.
Monsieur Robillard.
Mr. Robillard.
Madame Shanahan.
Madame Shanahan.
Mr. Sorbera.
Mr. Sorbera.
Miss Hepner.
Miss Hefner.
Mr. Noor Mohammed.
Mr. Noor Mohammed.
Mr. Chang.
Mr. Chang.
Mrs. Zaid.
Mrs. Zaid.
Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Rogers.
Miss Yip.
Ms. Yip.
Mr. Lewis Kitchener-Conestoga.
Mr. Lewis Kitchener-Conestoga.
Mr. Van.
These are the people voting no on the non-confidence vote. These are the people who want Trudeau to stay as Prime Minister. Keep in mind, these are the same individuals who time and time again have claimed he is not fit as leader anymore. You had members of the Liberal Party calling for his resignation. You had a petition going around. You have Jagmeet and the NDP, speaking of the fucking sellout NDP, calling out Trudeau over and over and over again, and there they are standing backing him. There's a lot of beef going on right now. Not looking good, guys.
Mr. Johns.
Mr. Johns.
Miss McPherson.
Miss McPherson.
Miss Idlout.
Miss Idlout.
Miss Gazan.
Miss Gazan.
Mr. Green.
Mr. Green.
Mr. McGregor.
Mr. McGregor.
Mr. Backrack.
Mr. Backrack.
Miss Blaney.
Miss Blaney.
Madame Hughes.
Madame Hughes.
Mr. Boulris.
Monsieur Boulris.
Mr. Angus.
Mr. Angus.
Miss Zarillo.
Miss Zarillo.
Miss Kwan.
To no
Miss
shock
Mason
at all. To literally no shock at all.
Morris.
The House will now wait for the electronic voting period to end before resuming its proceedings.
All right. Electronic voting period is going to take about 2 minutes. We're going to see everybody and who or how they voted. Obviously, the Liberals are going to vote no. It appears the Bloc has actually stepped up with what they said. I find that kind of interesting. The Bloc actually walking the walk instead of just talking the talk. Interesting. The NDP, though, we all knew this was going to happen. We all knew they were going to sell out Jagmeet. His $2.2 million pension is more important than the entire country. The NDP selling out for Justin Trudeau. There's Jagmeet himself. The guy who claims that Justin Trudeau is no longer fit as leader. God, he's such a loser. Jagmeet is a loser. Yeah, I guess the one thing we've learned from this, it's not going to pass, but the one thing we learned from this is the Bloc are actually fed up. The Bloc are walking the walk now. They're no longer just threatening. They actually pulled through. Even Francois. Francois voted yes. Imagine Trudeau voted yes. That would be fucking hilarious. Oh my god. Kevin voting yes. Shout out Kevin. Guys, this is just brutal. Our government sucks. Cocaine Randy voted no. Cocaine Randy. What a guy. We have a random independent, Pablo Rodriguez, voted no. Okay. Okay. Random independent, just chilling. Independent must be back in Trudeau. Hopefully you guys are having a good day or night, depending on where you are. I know most of us probably won't be after this goes to a no. But I guess we'll see how close the votes are in a second here.
I wish to inform the House that the electronic voting period has ended. If members were not able to vote due to technical difficulties, they may now use the raise hand function and the chair will recognise them.
Mrs. I see that. I was just saying, Mrs. Fry?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, my app doesn't seem to want to work, so I am voting nay. Thank you.
Boo.
Then I have the député, the honourable member from London, for London Fanshawe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Because of the noise, I could not hear if my vote was cast, so I would like to confirm that it was called and voted. I vote nay.
Indeed, it was called and cast.
The table will now compile the results of the vote.
Yes, pour.
All right, here we go.
I declare the motion defeated.
I see that the honourable member...
We all knew
the opposition
that
is
was
rising
gonna
up.
happen. Pure disappointment.
Vote to point out that members are not allowed to come and go during the vote. I did note that the NDP leader came in right in the middle of the vote, having missed the fact that the vote was on his own words. Would you please call him to order for having had his team vote against his own words?
Whoa.
I see that the honourable member from New Westminster, Burnaby is also rising on his feet.
Thank you very much, Madam Mr. Speaker. That's very rich coming from the Leader of the Opposition, who has left this House during his own motions in opposition day and refused to vote. As you know, Mr. Speaker, it is proper...
Colleagues, I very patiently listened to the member from the official opposition. I'd like to hear the honourable member from New Westminster, Burnaby. I didn't catch the last little bit of his comment.
Yeah, the vote just happened and it got denied. It got shut down. Not surprising because of the sellouts you see on the screen here. The National Pin Party.
So indeed, I would say that the fault is mine as Speaker for not making it clear for the purposes of electronic voting. There is a possibility, as all members know, and members have from time to time exercised that privilege, is that they're able to come in when with this advent of electronic voting.
Where's the clown wig at? Yeah, no kidding. Holy.
For Argentine La Petite Nation, point of order. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You took the time to explain the rules before the first vote to make sure there were no comings and goings. But I'd like to check the cameras because the leader of the official opposition rose during the first vote, left his seat, and then sat back down again before the end of the vote.
Okay, this is just getting pathetic. Come on, guys. We're complaining about people getting up and leaving during the vote. Oh my God, our parliament sucks. Our parliament is pathetic. This is just a disgrace. We pay these people to complain about people getting up during a vote.
The House virtually without her headset. Is that acceptable? The rules should be applicable to all, Mr. Speaker. Indeed, the honourable member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier is right. If it was during debate, but it's during a vote. And it was during technical difficulties. It's our usual practice that we allow people to address the clerk without compliant headset and a compliant microphone. The House will now proceed to the taking of the deferred recorded division on the motion of Mr. Singh relating to the business of supply. The question is as follows.
Seconded by Ms. Barron, moved that, given that, 1, Canadians are facing an affordability crisis and need more than temporary relief. 2, the government's $250 a working Canadians rebate would exclude many workers and other Canadians who need it the most. 3, may I dispense? 3, the 2021 Conservative Party platform included a one-time GST holiday.
The House call on the government to A, permanently remove the GST from essential goods, including home heating, grocery meals, internet, and mobile phone bills, diapers, and kids' clothes. B, expand the rebate to include all adults whose income is under the threshold and did not earn employment income in 2023, so that people like recent graduates trying to enter the workforce, retired seniors, people with disabilities, injured workers, workers on parental leave and long-term sick leave, and others in need are included. And
pay for that measure by putting in place an excess profit tax targeting the largest and most profitable corporations. The 10-minute period for members voting electronically has started, and the House will now proceed to the vote for members participating in person. All those in favour of the motion will please rise.
Mr. Singh.
Mr. Singh.
Mr. Julian.
Mr. Julian.
Miss Mon.
Oh, you have no fucking problem voting yes for that one, Jagmeet. I hope this doesn't pass just because of him. Just because of him.
Gregor.
Mr. Bachrach.
Mr. Bachrach.
Ms. Blaney.
Ms. Blaney.
Madame Hughes.
Although it's probably gonna pass because the Liberals are gonna vote yes on it.
Ms. Arillo.
Miss Kwan.
Ms. Kwan.
Miss May Sanish Gulf Island.
This guy claims we're in an affordability crisis. Who has created that crisis, Jagmeet? Who created it? Who created it? Tell me. Tell me. Oh my god. I can't believe this fucking government. I actually can't. It is pathetic.
Madame Le Boutillier.
Madame Le Boutier.
Madame Bigot.
Madame Bigot.
Miss Jazza.
A bunch of vile sellouts that claim they are for Canadians. They are so completely out of touch, they don't live in the same realm as most people. Most of these people have very high-paying jobs here in Parliament and make a very, very good pension once they retire. None of these people sitting in these chairs will ever probably actually struggle.
Natfi.
Mr. Badaway.
Mr. Badaway.
Mrs. Atwin.
Mrs. Atwin.
Mr. Sarai.
Mr. Sarai.
Ms. Vandenbeld.
Ms. Vandenbeld.
Mr. Seri.
Mr. Seri.
Mr. Long.
Mr. Long.
Mr. McDonald Avalon.
Mr. McDonald Avalon.
Mr. McKinnon Coquitlam Port Coquitlam.
Mr. McKinnon Coquitlam Port Coquitlam.
Mr. McLeod.
Mr. McLeod.
Mr. Morrissey.
Mr. Morrissey.
Monsieur Robillard.
Monsieur Robillard.
Madame Shanahan.
Madame Shanahan.
Mr. Sarbera.
Mr. Sorbera.
Miss Hepner.
Miss Hefner.
Mr. Chang.
Mr. Chang.
Mrs. Zaid.
Mrs. Zayed.
Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Rogers.
Miss Yip.
Ms. Yip.
Mr. Lewis Kitchener-Conestoga.
Mr. Lewis Kitchener-Conestoga.
Mr. Van Bynen.
Mr. Van Bynen.
Mr. Baines.
Mr. Baines.
Miss Bradford.
Miss Bradford.
Madame Chatel.
Madame Chatel.
Mr. Hanley.
Mr. Hanley.
Miss Kayabaga.
Miss Kayabaga.
Madame Lapointe.
Madame Lapointe.
Mr. Meow.
Mr. Meow.
Miss Taylor Roy.
Miss Taylor Roy.
Miss Thompson.
Miss Thompson.
Mr. Carr.
Mr. Carr.
Miss Gainey.
Miss Gainey.
If you are just joining right now, the non-confidence vote failed. It did not pass. Right now, they are voting on a cost of living relief for Canadians. This is the no part of that vote. We just had the yay.
Stubbs.
Mr. Paulus.
Mr. Paulus.
Mr. Upal.
Mr. Upal.
Mr. Halan.
Mr. Halan.
Miss Lewis Haldeman Norfolk.
Miss Lewis Haldeman Norfolk.
Mr. Barrett.
Mr. Barrett.
Mrs. Gray.
Mrs. Gray.
Mr. Barlow.
Mr. Barlow.
Mr. Ellis.
Mr. Ellis.
Mr. Kelly.
Mr. Kelly.
Mr. Baldinelli.
Mr. Baldinelli.
Mr. Cooper.
Mr. Cooper.
Mr. Kimmich.
Mr. Kimmich.
Mr. Kurek.
Mr. Kirk.
Mr. Jennis.
Mr. Jennis.
Mr. Lawrence.
Mr. Lawrence.
Mr. Duncan Stormont Dundas Southern Gary.
Mr. Duncan Stormadunda South Gary.
Mr. Berthold.
Mr. Berthold.
Mr. Workington.
Mr. Workington.
Miss Ferrari.
Miss Ferrari.
Mr. Chambers.
Mr. Chambers.
Mr. Viss.
Mr. Viss.
Mr. McCauley in Edmonton West.
Mr. McCauley Edmonton West.
Mr. Lloyd.
Mr. Lloyd.
Mr. Strahl.
Mr. Strahl.
Mr. Brassard.
Mr. Brassard.
Mr. Aitchison.
Mr. Aitchison.
Mr. Godin.
Mr. Godin.
Mr. Hobach.
Mr. Hobach.
Mrs. Roberts.
Mrs. Roberts.
Mr. Tucker.
Mr. Tucker.
Mrs. Cramp Nyman.
Mrs. Cramp Nyman.
Madame Vien.
Madame Vien.
Mr. Patzer.
Mr. Patzer.
Mrs. Gallant.
Mrs. Gallant.
Mr. Shipley.
Mr. Shipley.
Mr. Muse.
Mr. Muse.
Mr. Redicott.
Mr. Redicott.
Mr. Van Papta.
Mr. Van Papta.
Mr. Waugh.
Mr. Waugh.
Mr. Steinley.
Mr. Stanley.
Mr. Calkins.
Mr. Calkins.
Miss Rude.
Miss Rude.
Monsieur Généreux.
Monsieur Généreux.
Mr. Major.
Mr. Major.
Mr. Martel.
Monsieur Martel.
Monsieur Gould.
Monsieur Gould.
Mr. Caputo.
Mr. Caputo.
Mr. Epp.
Mr. Epp.
Mr. Cram.
Mr. Cram.
Mr. Tolmie.
Mr. Tolmie.
Mrs. Wagenthal.
Mrs. Wagenthal.
Mr. Albus.
Mr. Albus.
Mr. Bragdon.
Mr. Bragdon.
Mr. Dalton.
Mr. Dalton.
Mr. Nader.
Mr. Nader.
Mr. McLean.
Mr. McLean.
Mr. McGuire.
Mr. McGuire.
Mr. Reed.
Mr. Reed.
Mr. Shields.
Mr. Shields.
Mr. Falk Provencher.
Mr. Falk Provencher.
Mr. Williamson.
Mr. Williamson.
Mr. Arnold.
Mr. Arnold.
Mr. D'Entremont.
Mr. D'Entremont.
Mr. Soroka.
Mr. Soroka.
Mr. Carey.
Mr. Carey.
Mr. Vidal.
Mr. Vidal.
Mr. Dowdle.
Mr. Dowdle.
Mr. Lake.
Mr. Lake.
Mr. Vierson.
Mr. Vierson.
Mr. Ruff.
Mr. Ruff.
Mr. Fast.
Mr. Fast.
Mr. Leipert.
Mr. Leipert.
Mr. Leslie.
Mr. Leslie.
Mr. Giovanni.
Mr. Giovanni.
Mr. Stewart, Toronto St. Paul's.
Mr. Stewart, Toronto St. Paul's.
Mr. Terrien.
Monsieur Terrien.
The CCP agent's back.
Madame Larouche.
Monsieur Sauvé.
Monsieur Sauvé.
Que la période de
The House will now wait for the electronic voting period to end before resuming its proceedings.
All right, electronic voting period on the cost of living relief for Canadians. Now, this might sound like something good, right? The cost of living relief, right? That sounds pretty good. No, it's not good. It's actually really bad because they are going to jack up everything. Everything. We got a lot of liberals saying no. Interesting. Take a look at this. Liberals not jumping on board with the NDP here. Oh, that's actually kind of funny. NDP, Jagmeet was all like, guys, let's get together. I'll help you not get voted out. Now in return, you help me with what I want, right? Nope. Nope. Everyone is saying no. There is no relief. Well, because the NDP want to just give, like, free everything, essentially, right? And they can't do that. We can't do that, guys. Where's that money gonna come from? What are we doing here? This is great. Jagmeet, how do you feel now, buddy? The entire House is against him. The entire House is against this motion. Except the NDP. The NDP are the only people for it. Jagmeet's Maserati will pay for it. You're damn right it will. You better have a lot of those Maseratis, because that's going to dry up quickly. Well, yeah, from Brazil. Yeah. No, we'll probably just send another 3 or so billion to them. We'll just keep sending Brazil an actual dictatorship money. Yeah, that's a fantastic idea. A great financial idea. A great financial plan that helps Canadians in the long run. Sending our money to other countries. This will help you get fed. This will help you get a new house. We send $5 billion to Ukraine. Send another $10 billion to Israel or whoever. Why don't we send $50 billion to Russia? Why not? We're just giving everybody money, right? This helps us in the long term, guys. Remember that. Remember that. Giving away your money helps you in the long term. Holy, they think we're actually stupid. They think we are all stupid. Wild times we're living in, gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen. Holy. What does this vote for? This is for the cost of living relief for Canadians. The only people who want this to pass are the NDP. The NDP believe that just giving out free everything is the way to go. Most likely, taxing the hell out of everybody while doing it. Good times. Anyway, electronic voting period is coming to an end. Is this the 250? No, that passed a couple weeks ago. I believe that passed a couple weeks ago. because the $250 was supposed to be a part of the Liberal 2-month tax break or whatever. That's all part of the one thing, I believe. I don't know, though. That's what I believe. Oh, Fang. You are an interesting individual. They split it? Oh, did they? Well, I guess the $250, you're not getting that either, guys. The non-confidence vote failed, yes, and this vote has failed as well. Nothing has passed today. Jagmeet wants the $250 for himself. He's got to make those Maserati payments. Okay, any minute now, we should get a final okay, Blanchette had a late vote there. Well, we should get the final tally here any second. I believe this is going to pass. Or, not pass, sorry. Not pass.
Voting period is finished. If members were not able to vote due to technical difficulties, they may now use the raise hand function and the chair will recognize them.
Le bureau va maintenant compiler les résultats du vote.
The table will now compile the results of the vote.
Yes pour 28-28. Nays contre 303 303.
Je déclare la motion rejetée.
I declare the motion defeated.
Oh, yes, it was defeated. Oh my god, do we have a point of order?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. During this important vote for the NDP to ensure that the GST was taken off family essential.
If it was so important, then why isn't Jagmeet rising?
The leader of the official opposition ran away. He fled the scene. Couldn't come up with a...
Shut up.
Je désire informer la Chambre qu'en raison...
I wish to inform the House that due to the deferred recorded divisions,
the leader of the opposition ran away during the vote. I want to recount it.
Like, shut up. Get out of here.
On a point of order.
Mr. Speaker, I'm rising on a point of order out of question period. Mr. Speaker, I'm really afraid that an extremely dangerous precedent is being set with respect to how you're allowing questions to continue to go on when they're
Why is this
not
guy
about
still
the
here?
administration of business. We've had Conservatives today, a number of them, bring up issues, talk about the NDP for the whole entire question, and then finally at the end of the question, they say, will the government or will the Prime Minister let the NDP leader do something? And it's clearly not in line with government business. Mr. Speaker, I go back to my question from a week and a half ago, where I clearly started talking about government measures. My question started last week. Our government announced measures and went on. At the end of my question, I specifically asked, and the question was to the Prime Minister, why he should allow the leader of the opposition to allow his MPs to vote in favor of that legislation. Somehow you deemed my question out of order, but when we see what's going on today, you routinely allow those questions to stand. Finally,
this is an absolute zoo.
I think that...
Order, please. The Honourable Member for Kingston the Island.
In conclusion, I just wanted to add, Mr. Speaker, that I think that one of the things that you're doing, which I think is a huge mistake, is to allow the entire question to be asked, and then you say, well, I see the minister rising on his or her feet. When you do that, of course, somebody has to...
Well, Mark, why don't you take position of the speaker there, buddy? How about that?
Once again, and I asked this last week,
Mr. Speaker, you're doing a bad job.
Consider all of this.
Yes, we all know Greg is corrupt. All right, get over it, buddy. Why is this even a point of order?
Concrete ruling that we can then rely on.
Thank the Honourable Member from Kingston the Island. I do see two other points of order. The Honourable Member from Regina Capel, and then followed by the Honourable Member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I just noticed the
virtually unprecedented attack on a sitting chair occupant in real time. As the
here we
members know,
go.
if he's got specific complaints about the actions of a
Sheer, please don't white knight for Greg. Come on.
when that was done in this chamber, this member voted against that motion. I just want to point that out. I would also point out that many times in this House, we hear Liberal members have entire preambles to questions that have nothing to do with government business, or they have an ask that has nothing to do with government business, and sometimes they have both, and you have allowed those questions to stand. So, based on that guidance that you gave, we didn't get up afterwards and challenge your ruling or insult your ability to handle question period. We just simply adapted and followed the precedents that you have set out for the chamber. And I would say it is absolutely relevant, and it is absolutely within the purview of government to ask the Prime Minister what promises, what policies, what deals he offered another party in order to keep their support so that he can stay in power. That's exactly what those questions were today. And I just find it shameful that the Parliamentary Secretary of the Government House Leader would challenge your authority and your ability to handle question period.
I see that there are a couple of other points of order, and I hope that there will be new points of order. I did want to recognize a member from Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, I have a problem. I mean, my seat right now is a ways away from yours, Mr. Speaker. And when members of the House are bringing forward points of order for your consideration, I often can't even hear what those points of order are with my microphone because the Conservatives are causing such an uproar. And I have to say, Mr. Speaker, it appears that sometimes decisions are being made by the table based on how much uproar and rude behavior we see from the Conservatives. And my perspective is that the loudest, squeakiest, whiniest wheel in the House should not be the ones that dictate the behavior of the House. So for me, when I can't even hear what those points of order are, because other members, Conservative members of this House, seem to feel that they have the right to instruct you on what would be your decision, that's a problem because it means that I can't participate fully as a member of Parliament. Thank you.
I see the honourable member from, I want to say Mackenzie, Peace River Mackenzie.
Greg is so done with this shit. He just wants to leave.
From New Westminster, Burnaby.
Yeah, thank you, Speaker. On that same point of order, I think it's often during question period, even though I am a little bit closer to you, Mr. Speaker, I was unable to hear what was going on because members of the New Democratic Party, specifically the member from Burnaby, Westminster, as well as Timmins James Bay, was carrying on giving instruction to the Speaker, making it very difficult for members, even on this side, to hear what the Speaker was saying. So I think that the whip from the New Democratic Party has folks within her own area that she needs to address her concerns with because it's obstructing the business of this House.
And les deux dernières interventions sur ce sujet.
Last two remarks on this point. The honourable member for New Westminster Burnaby, followed by the honourable member for Berthier-Masquinongé.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. I have to say this is very rich, coming from my colleague, the member from Regina Capel, who, when he was Speaker, systematically from 2011 to 2015, cut off any question that was not dealing with government administration and cut them off after 10 or 12 seconds. So, Mr. Speaker, during that period, and this is the Scheer doctrine, if you like, if we didn't.
Member knows that we cannot mention a sitting member's last name.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. If we did not establish that it had to do with government administration at the beginning of the question was cut off halfway through. Conservatives know this. That is what was put into place. Conservatives need to respect the rules of this House.
Fang is just one of the greatest trolls I think I've ever seen. Some of those paragraphs this guy's posted are wild. Holy.
I thank all members. J'ai pas eu la chance d'avoir une intervention.
I have not heard from the Bloc Québécois, so I would invite the honourable member for Berthier-Masquinongé. Oh, I'm so sorry. It's the honourable member for Drummond. Yes, I know that it's very flattering, for the member for Berthier-Masquinongé, but in any case, it's a bit rich to hear the NDP and the Conservatives to constantly blame each other about and say the other one is more responsible for what's going on in this house. We're stuck between the two of them, and on both sides, they're yelling, they're hurling invective. It's disruptive. We've risen before to mention this, even during statements by members. There's so much noise, conversation. During question period, it's almost unbearable. Mr. Speaker, I think all of the parties should make an effort. And I hope you will show vigilance on this. We should show at least some minimum level of decorum and mutual respect. And let's not forget our interpreters, who are finding it harder and harder to do their work due to the incredibly loud noise in this House and the lack of respect.
Je vois l'honorable député de Timmins James Bay qui...
The honourable member for Timmins James Bay, who would like to make some brief remarks, and then another member.
Thank you. Yes, I noticed that I'm allowed a short
Oh, Beetlejuice. Oh, no.
The issue speaks to our lack of faith, that every member should be treated fairly, but they're not. And we have learned very quickly that if the Conservatives create enough chaos, the Speaker bends to that. So when the New Democrats raise points, they're shut down. On points of order, we're told to sit down. In fact, one of the only times I remember the Speaker standing up on a point was when my colleague was wearing a brooch. And yet we've seen outrageous insults and attacks.
Point of order right now is just NDP cry period. Oh my God, man.
Precedent. If the Speaker bends to toxicity, then we will fight back because we have the smallest numbers, the fewest questions. And if the Speaker doesn't allow a proper fairness and continues to bend to the Conservatives in their toxic behavior, then there will be pushback, and it undermines this House.
All right, colleagues, I've entertained a round of questions from all the political parties here. I'm going to ask members, first of all, a number of the issues which are raised on are issues which the Chair has engaged to come back to the House with, and the Chair indeed will be coming back very shortly. This is an issue which we've been working on, and we will move very quickly on that front. I thank members for their intervention. Surtout, j'apprécie énormément.
I especially appreciate how important it is that we maintain a respectful environment and that we keep decorum here.
Member from Saanich Gulf Islands is rising on a point of order. I hope it will be new
Mr.
and
Speaker.
relevant.
Just that in an effort to avoid bogging down the House, if I don't rise to contribute to every debate, it doesn't mean that the Green Party of Canada doesn't exist in this place. So I would appreciate it if when the Speaker says we've heard from all parties in this place, I try to be helpful, not invisible.
I thank the honourable member, and if the honourable member...
You want to be helpful, then maybe you can just leave.
...opportunity to speak. I wish to inform the House that the volume of earpieces will now be reset. Je désire informer la Chambre...
I think Fang might be Trudeau's burner account, to be honest with you. That's pretty wild. He's literally just repeating the same things he does. All right, guys. That, I believe, is going to do it for today. Another point of order? No, we're tabling documents. All right, that's it, guys. What a stream. What a disappointing ending to the stream. Non-confidence vote did not pass. But I guess it didn't really make up for it. But Jagmeet didn't get what he wanted as well. So I guess it was kind of a big slap in the face for Jagmeet. A big spit in the face. Screw you, Jagmeet. Screw you. All right, guys. Have a great rest of your day or night, depending on where you are from. Take it easy. Bye-bye.